Well, hello, hello, hello. Oh no, it looks like my Rumble location is not working. Oh no, oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry to people on Rumble. I forgot to update the streaming things. Oh, I apologize. I know my friend Cubert loves to watch on Rumble. I guess that's just not going to work out today. The thing with Rumble is that they make you update the streaming keys like every single time, and it's really annoying, and they're the only ones that make you to do that, and I forgot. I am sorry. I forgot Cubert. I'll get you next week. But guys, welcome to Happy Hour. Happy Hour is, well, last week's Happy Hour is more eventful than usual, but normally Happy Hour is a time where we come together on my second YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke, and on my regular channels on Odyssey, Rockfin, normally Rumble when I do my job correctly and actually set up the stream, and even on, I think I'm even on Getter. Oh, hang on, I was so distracted by the fact that Rumble wasn't working. I'm not even live on the, it is all, we are falling apart here already. Like, this is great. Happy Hour is already falling apart. Awesome. But guys, Happy Hour is a time where we watch a woke training or a woke webinar of some sort, and I have some beers or other assorted drinks. I've got like 6 beers today. I'm not going to drink all the beers on the stream. You don't have to worry about it. But what we do is we watch a woke training and we comment on it and we learn what they're teaching and we learn what they're doing. Now, last week was a little bit eventful because if you guys recall, last week our happy hour featured da 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 the Burlington, Vermont School District. And we were so perturbed during happy hour, even with beer. Beer was not enough to make these presentations watchable. We were so perturbed at what we saw happening right in front of us that a group of us spent all weekend researching the Burlington School District, looking into what was going on, and we ended up making national news this week based on what was covered on happy hour last week. And it was amazing. I was so proud. I know I've said this a million times on my main channel, but like, I just cannot continue to gush enough about how amazing my Unwoke army is, how incredible they've all been, about the amazing research that's been taking place. It's been wonderful. And we're not going to stop there because today, oh, and I just want to mention, like, for those who haven't been keeping up on it, PragerU talked about our research. Ben Shapiro talked about our research. Laura Ingram featured it on the Ingram Angle. It's been covered all over the place. Local Vermont media are starting to pick it up. It actually has made a significant impact, and I suspect it is going to continue to make an impact because we are continuing to look in to what is going on in Burlington, Vermont. We're now actually expanding what we're doing into different and neighboring towns. And in fact, it's not the first video today, but I have another video that we might watch after the first video that goes into, there is a town, one town over from Burlington, Vermont, who has also built their entire school budget based on equity. And I have their equity budget presentation. That's not the one we're going to watch first. We might watch it second if I feel up to it. For folks in the Unwoke Army, I've already posted it in the Discord, so we're gonna do that. But guys, just big round of congratulations again. This thread on Twitter has over 1 million views, and it all started here with Happy Hour, where a few of us just gathered on a Friday afternoon for some drinks and some laughs, and we ended up actually doing something good. Well, today on Happy Hour, we are going to continue looking into what's going on in Vermont because it's kind of like, listen, if we can do double duty and do research at the same time as we have fun, that's, I think, the way to go. So the presentation I've decided that we're going to look at today is called, aptly, The Future of Equity in Vermont Education. Huh. Who would have thunk it? Who would have thought there would be people behind all these pushes for equity in Vermont schools? This is from the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity. I'm going to bring that up in a separate window. And we've got a whole bunch of people here. We've got let me just see what let me just see what, oh, they've got a fucking radio ad. Oh, did you guys see this? Look at what they've got featured on their YouTube channel. They literally have a radio ad for equity funding. Holy shit. Let's watch this real quick. Hang on. I just need to disconnect. This ad's only like 30 seconds long. Let's see what this ad says. You can tell I do a lot of research before I do these streams.
School funding mean?
It means that every child in Vermont.
Hang on.
What does equity in school funding mean?
It means that every child in Vermont has the chance to thrive, regardless of where they live and how much money their family makes.
But today in Vermont, the majority of school districts aren't receiving their fair share of education funds, and it's hurting our state's future.
The Coalition for Vermont Student Equity is asking state legislators to fix this.
This affects everyone in Vermont, so get involved. Learn more about this issue. Make your voice heard. Help Vermont's children.
Get started at cvtse.org.
Wow. Well, that sounded like nothing at all like what we know equity actually is, does it? That makes equity sound kind of nice. It's just about making sure the students who need the money get the money. Now, listen, for those of you who are unaware, I grew up in Vermont. I grew up in Williamstown, Vermont. I went in through the Williamstown public school system. It is an extremely small school system. I graduated with 48 people in my graduating class. I understand rural Vermont schools, and I understand underfunded rural Vermont schools. I was one of very few people in my graduating class to even leave the state of Vermont. Most of the people I graduated with are still there, and there's nothing wrong with that. I want to be clear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But very few people come out of those schools and go on to to do things that are outside of the town in which they grew up. And again, no shade on people who do that. But I just wanted to, I got some comments on last week's video. People were saying, you know nothing about Vermont schools. I'm like, I know a lot about Vermont schools. And I know that the school that I went to was completely underfunded. I was extremely bored. I didn't even do homework. Check this out. I didn't even do homework. And I graduated like third in my class. I didn't even try. And, I absolutely could have been valedictorian if I actually tried. But I'm deeply familiar with this, and so this is something that for me is kind of close to my heart, and I'm a little perturbed about what I've seen. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to look into this coalition on equity, and we're going to watch this presentation that they gave, The Future of Education, a panel discussion, and we're going to learn more about what they're doing. And if this doesn't turn out to be fruitful, I have another presentation on the back burner, because listen, guys, and Naruto, I did see your super chat. I'll get to that in a second, but I just want to say this. Sometimes we pick out presentations for happy hour that are spicy, that are sassy, that we know are going to be cringe. Let's be honest, it's not about them being spicy or sassy. We watch them because we know they're going to be cringe and we can laugh and make fun of them. That's why we do it. I don't know that these presentations today are going to be the same thing, but the presentations that we're going to watch today, I think are going to be important, especially for the Unwoke Army, for understanding the project that we're working on. And so this is what we're doing right now. I'm going to call it journalism. We're doing more journalism than actual journalists do. The Burlington Public Schools, we're doing everything out in the open, in the public, on YouTube. And no journalist bothered to look into it until we accidentally stumbled on it. And one of the things that I emphasized to the Unwoke Army when we started looking into the Burlington schools last week is that it's just a matter of shifting through a lot of stuff. It's a matter of looking at everything they have out there, listening to all their videos, knowing that maybe 80% of the video is really not going to be that interesting, but you're not listening for the 80%, you're listening for the 20%. And so we're all going to do a little bit of research today. We're going to use our time well together, and hopefully we have fun doing it. Now, Naruto did send in a super chat. Little off color, Naruto. That's all right. Did you ever watch Carrie Smith's denunciation of you on You Are Here? So here's the thing with this. So for those who don't know, for those who are not in my locals, I happen to be live streaming in my locals when Carrie Smith, formerly of Unsafe Space, I just relish the fact that I can say formerly, she went on Elijah Schaefer's show, You Are Here. And I happen to be live streaming in my locals community when my locals were like, Karlyn, Carrie is on You Are Here. If you guys don't know, Carrie Smith has caused me any number of fucking headaches over the past year and a half because she's psychotic. And so I decided to have a little bit of fun, and I crowdsourced on this live stream a super chat that we sent into You Are Here to ask Carrie to publicly denounce me, because earlier that day, I had started a public denunciation contest for who could best publicly denounce me in the very best way. And so we invited Carrie to join us in the public denunciations of me. Here's the thing. I never went back and watched. I never actually went back and watched to see if she denounced me or not. So I don't know. Like, can anyone tell me, did that actually happen? Because if Carrie actually denounced me on You Are Here, I will 100% go back and watch. But for some reason, I was under the impression that they didn't read the super chat and that she never actually denounced me. So I don't know. If you guys can let me know, yeah, if you guys if anyone saw the public denunciation super chat, please let me know because I would actually like to go back and see it if it so happened. That's the kind of stuff we do in my locals community. Sometimes we do serious things in my locals communities like investigate the Burlington, Vermont school district. Sometimes we do fun things like subversive super chats when my enemies are on You Are Here to ask them to publicly denounce me just because we know it's going to rattle them. You get all that and much, 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 much more when you become a member of my locals community. My locals is the best place on the internet. We are a genuine community where we help each other, we support each other, we do good work, we work hard, and we play hard in my locals community. If you would like to be part of the Unwoke army that is currently doing research into the Burlington schools, and we'll probably have some other projects coming up as well, you need to become a supporter in my locals community in order to be able to do that. Okay? That's part of the requirements. And the reason it's a requirement is not because it's like a money-making thing. It's because you need to come to our community Zooms. We do them on Mondays and Wednesdays. And I need to be able to get to know you and evaluate that you are not a psycho. Because there are way too many psychos working in the anti-CRT space, the anti-woke space, and I just can't have it. It's too much. I cannot deal with it. So, if you would like to support the work I'm doing and get access to my locals community, you can join us at kb.locals.com/support for $5 a month. You can also join us for $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can also make a one-time gift. Now, I will say this, I did have a goal of getting 100 new supporters in my locals by my birthday. My birthday is in 4 days, and I'm not there yet. And I'm thrilled that the new members that I've seen coming into the community, I'm really excited. Thank you guys all for supporting my work. It really does make a difference. But I would really, 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 really like to get some more supporters into my community because here's the thing, guys. I'm not a well-funded activist. I cannot do the work that I'm doing without your support. It might be $5 a month for you, which is less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but it means a whole heck of a lot to me. And so if you enjoy the work I do, if you find it valuable, if you appreciate that we unearthed that the Burlington schools were grooming elementary schoolers with the help of guidance counselors to come out as trans in the 5th grade, if you appreciate the work we're doing, come be a member in locals because it's what makes it all possible. And if people don't show up and they don't support the work, guess what? The work ain't going to happen. The other way that you can support my work, and this is a timely one as well, is I just got my books yesterday. I just got the print copy of Actively Unwoke yesterday. It's so pretty. I love it so much. I have a book coming out next month on May 10th. It was supposed to come out at the end of April. It got pushed back 2 weeks because of supply chain issues with the printer. It's not our fault. It's not their fault. It's Joe Biden's fault. Fuck Joe Biden for delaying my book for 2 weeks. That's all I have to say. But it is called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against woke insanity in your life. And it is this book outlines the philosophy that is being put into practice by the Unwoke army. This is the philosophy behind all of this. And our success with the Burlington schools is a proof of concept that what is in this book actually does work and can make a difference. So if you're so inclined, you can pre-order the book. I have a link at the top of the chat on YouTube. I also have it in the description on all of the channels that we are streaming on right now. Sadly, not on Rumble because I don't know how to set things up correctly, but I promise I will next time. But if you guys want to go ahead and pre-order the book, pre-orders make a really big difference. Every single pre-order of the book gets counted in the total of the first week of the book release, which is the thing that decides what's on the New York Times bestsellers list. Now, the New York Times bestsellers list is overtly political. I have a really hard time believing they're going to put my book on that list, even if I do have one of the best-selling books that week, which I don't actually think is out of the realm of possibility. My publisher's actually pretty excited about the pre-sales they've seen so far. But every pre-order does help. So if you want to pick up the hardcover, the Kindle version, the audio version, that's all available right now over on Amazon. If you are not inclined to order through Amazon, I totally get it. Go to activelyunwoke.com and you will have a whole list of non-Amazon options. You can get it from Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, your local bookseller, all sorts of different stuff. But I really appreciate the pre-orders, guys. We are going to be doing a book club in my locals for Actively Unwoke, of course. And yes, there will be autographed copies coming. And for those of you who've already ordered your book, I've got these handy book plates. I'm going to be doing personalized book plates for people as well. These are just things that you can kind of stick in the book. But there will be actual autographed copies coming through Premier Collectibles very, very soon. They're just not up yet because I don't know why. They just aren't. But they will be coming soon. So it's probably just because they haven't gotten the books. Because like I said, I literally just got my books yesterday. And the autographed copies won't go on sale until they actually have the books in hand, I think. But the fact that I got my books yesterday says that they're probably coming soon. All right, guys, enough shilling. Let's get into it. We got a couple more orders of business. One order of business we have, of course, is that you can download your Unwoke bingo card. I'm not sure today's going to be a good day for Unwoke bingo, but who knows? We always want to give it a try. The link is in the description below. You go ahead and generate your card. You get your free space in the middle, and then we are going for lines or we are going for corners. And if you get a bingo on your card, just shout out bingo in the chat. We will all celebrate you. You won't win anything, but we'll give you a hearty round of applause. And then once someone gets their first bingo, then we go for blackout bingo. We have yet to get a blackout bingo. I have full faith that it will happen someday, somewhere, somehow. I need to add some new words to the bingo card. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a brainstorming session in the Unwoke Army Discord. I think that'd be pretty great. All right. The last thing we have to do is I need a beer. And I've got 6 beers to choose from today. I got a whole trough of beer. But I want to show you guys because one of the things that I like doing on Happy Hour is I like educating people about beer because I love beer. Beer's great. I've got a whole bunch of good ones today. I've got this new beer from Stargazer Brewing. I've got a couple from them. Look how pretty that is. I oftentimes buy beer based on the can. And this is did this say 12%? Oh no, that's where it's brewed. I was like, oh my God, I can't drink that. This is a Weiss style beer with banana, cherry, raspberry, graham cracker, marshmallow, and milk sugar. So that sounds really interesting. Now I have a very similar one also from Skygazer Brewing, but it's a little bit cooler. I just love the colors. It's so pretty. And this is a Synergy raspberry coconut cake. It's a similar Weiss style beer with cherry, orange, raspberry, coconut, and milk sugar. So that's another option for us today. I've got this one. This, I'm fairly certain I've had this before, but I don't remember. I love Southern Tier. Southern Tier is one of my favorite breweries. They do really, really, really good beer. This one's called Thick Mint, which is an imperial milk stout based on the Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies. I'm like 80% positive I've had this before, but I don't remember. Oh, people are saying bananas don't belong in beer. Well, we'll see about that. Then I've got Whoop, there it is. This is a whoopie pie beer. This is Orono Brewing Company Imperial Whoopie Pie Stout, and this one is a 10%er. So this one is not the initial beer I'm going to drink. This is a big beer. This is a big beer. Oh, Sam, you're near Southern Tier. Oh my God, they're so good. They're so good. Pumpkin is the best. It's like my all-time favorite. Then I got this. I actually might start with this one because I'm curious about this one. It's key lime pie in a beer. Look at that. Pie scraper. Key lime pie. And I have never had a key lime pie beer. It's an ale with key lime, vanilla, graham cracker, and milk sugar. Apparently milk sugar is a thing now that is going in beers. I actually haven't seen milk sugar in a lot of stuff before today. And then the last one I have is from Left Hand Brewing Company. It is a Black Forest cake beer. We're doing dessert beer. It's a dessert beer kind of day. A dessert beer kind of day. So if you have a preference of which one I should start with, please go ahead and chat that preference in right now, and we'll see who wins out. I feel so bad. I wonder if there's any way I can fix I don't know if I can fix the Rumble stream is the problem. Dang. Sorry, Cubert. Sorry, everyone who watches on Rumble. It is just what it is. Maybe, hang on. Maybe I can. Yeah, I already took it out. Never mind. They'll have to survive for today. They'll have to. Okay, people are saying key lime. Is there consensus around key lime? I'll just give it one more minute while I bring up our presentation. No, stop share screen, because I need to make sure the audio's there. All right. It looks as though key lime. Yes. Oh, everyone, it's a key lime or thin mint. Key lime or thin mint. We're gonna go with key lime because I think that the thick mint one is strong, and like I said, key lime. Okay, you guys are giving me my way. We're gonna do key lime. Let's see what color this beer is. I can't wait to see. Look, I'm so professional on happy hour that it takes us a half hour to even start the stream. It's like happy hour. It's a little bit more of a laid back day. Come on. All right, let's see. It looks nice and light. Not green at all. That's about what I would expect a key lime beer to look like. Maybe a little, I expected maybe a little bit lighter. What is the alcohol content on this beer? 7%? Shit, I should have looked at that before I poured it. It doesn't smell like a key lime beer. It just smells like a regular beer. Huh. You know, this is one of those beers. I'm not convinced it actually tastes like key lime pie. But what I will say is that it's delightful. It is one of those beers that, like, this would be a great beer to drink on, like, a really hot day when you're, like, out at the beach or you're, like, laying out in the sun or something, and you just want something that, like, goes down, like really, really easily. That's kinda like what this, it does not taste like 7% at all in any way. Mm. Just T says, I like drinking green things, green juice, shamrock shakes, Midori. I like all those things as well, Jess. I like a good shamrock shake. All right, guys, who's ready to get started with a happy hour? We're going to learn about the future of equity in Vermont education. Let's get this party started.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this panel discussion on the future of equity in Vermont education.
And the Unwoke Army, we might want to take notes,
Kendra
okay?
Sowers, and I'm on the Burlington School Board, and I'm also the chair of the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity, who's hosting this event tonight. The coalition is composed of school board members from various communities and districts from all across the state. We share a common belief that all of Vermont's children deserve equitable educational outcomes. Our mission is to advocate that the legislature adopt the recommendations of the Pupil Weighting Factors Report during this current legislative biennium. Tonight's event.
They're trying to get the state legislature to mandate equity in the schools. That absolutely sounds like something Vermont would do. And just so you guys know, the Democrats in Vermont have a veto-proof supermajority. And basically, they have technically a Republican governor, but he's not really a Republican. He's not really a Republican at all. He is a Democrat. He is a moderate Democrat at best. He is not a Republican. So if what I'm saying is that if they try to pass equity in the schools, they will probably be successful in Vermont.
Features 5 panelists who will be talking about the current state of education funding, explaining how it works, describing the challenges school districts face, and discussing the current proposal being put forth by the legislative task force that could affect future education funding.
No, Twin Tails, he's not even a rhino. He's a Democrat.
Q&A, and you're also welcome
not even a
to
rhino.
type
Democrat.
questions in the chat as we go along, or wait until the discussion has finished and raise your virtual hand to be called on. We will be sure to take as many questions as we can after the panel discussion. So I'm delighted now to introduce the panelists for tonight's discussion. Panelists, please wave your hand when I introduce you so everyone knows who you are. Nicole Mace is the finance manager at the Winooski School District. She has a law degree from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's degree in public policy and management from Carnegie Mellon University. Nicole was the general counsel and then executive director of the Vermont School Boards Association from 2011 to 2019. She is a parent of a fifth grader at JFK Elementary School in Winooski and has been a resident of Winooski since 2009. Nicole served on the Winooski City Council from 2015 to 2019. Welcome, Nicole.
They always sound like they're dead inside, don't they?
Ted Plemenis
Like,
is the
truly.
Chief Financial Officer for the Rutland City Public Schools. After earning a bachelor's degree in Public and International Affairs and a master's degree in Business Administration, Ted served as a financial executive for ExxonMobil Corporation for more than 30 years. His prior experience in education finance includes serving for 2 years as the Director of Finance and Administration for a division of Rice University, and volunteering for several years as an advisor to the Board of Trustees for an elementary and a middle school. Welcome, Ted. Alex Yin has been serving on the Winooski School Board since 2017. While on the board, he helped pass a $57.8 million bond to build and renovate school facilities for an overcrowded district. He has also been an advocate in turning the cultural liaison positions in Winooski into a year-long position to help strengthen the relationship between the new American families and the school district. Alex is the executive director of institutional research at the University of Vermont, where he is responsible for the school's data analytics. Welcome to you, Alex.
Oh, UVM, excellent.
Rory Tebow is the current chair of the Cabot School Board of Directors and also serves on the Caledonia.
Remember that UVM is actively partnering with the Burlington Middle School to do one of that YPAR program in which they turn middle schoolers into little activists. That is a partnership with the University of Vermont. And that guy, Alex, works at the University of Vermont. Let's just keep that in mind.
Central Supervisory Union Board. Rory's school board involvement began with Cabot's Act 46 process. He served as the primary author of the Cabot School District Alternative Governance Structure Proposal, which was ultimately accepted by the State Board of Education. During his time as a board member, Rory has focused on supporting Cabot Schools' innovative approaches to public education, namely the integration of project-based learning into all grade levels, and most recently, increased collaboration with other districts within the enlarged supervisory union. Rory is the state's attorney for Washington County. Welcome, Rory.
The state's attorney.
Representative Laura Sibilia
Holy
was
shit.
elected in 2014 and currently serves in the Vermont House of Representatives. She is the vice chair of the Energy and Technology
She
Committee.
looks like a bitch.
Laura has lived in
I
southern
said it.
Vermont
I'm not
for more
sorry.
than 30 years and has served on the Dover School Board since 2003.
Oh, good.
She was a pioneering member of the New River Valley School District Board in 2018 and has been working on the pupil weighting issue for many years. Welcome, Laura, and thank you to all the panelists for being here this evening. So let's begin. I think it would be really helpful to start this discussion by providing some background for our discussion. So Nicole, I was hoping you could talk to us about the Brigham decision and how it led to Act 60, which is the basis of our existing funding formula.
Sure, happy to. So Brigham versus State of Vermont was a 1997 decision of the Vermont Supreme Court. At the time of the decision, Vermont funded public education through a combination of local property tax assessments and state aid, which was known as the Foundation Plan. The plaintiffs in Brigham alleged that that funding system violated the Vermont Constitution by, one, depriving students residing in property poor school districts of their right to the same educational opportunities as students in wealthier districts, and also depriving property poor school districts of the ability to raise sufficient money to provide educational opportunities equal to those in wealthier school districts.
I just want to take a quick pause. And again, as someone who went to a poor Vermont school, like, there's going to be some of this that I actually might think is legit because, again, I grew up in a very small town in Vermont, and there was a school this is why school choice is so important. My cousins lived I have more cousins than I can count on my fingers and my toes, but they lived the ones I was closest to lived 2 miles down the road from me. 2 miles away, and they went to a significantly wealthier school than what I had access to. And so there might be, I just want to note for like, I know we're talking about equity, and I know that we all know what equity means, but I also just want to make mention that there are very real like problems with the funding in some Vermont schools. And so there might be things that they say on this webinar that are actually legitimate, and I'm going to try to be intellectually honest about this and make notes where I can, because like I would have given this, again, why school choice is so important. I would have given my left arm to go to the school that my cousins went to that lived 2 miles away from me down the road.
And compelling those districts to impose disproportionately high tax rates. So upon examining the evidence, the court determined that the evidence did support plaintiffs' claim that wide disparities in student expenditures existed, and that those disparities generally correlated with taxable property wealth within the districts. And I'm going to give you a couple quotes from the decision. Quote, although equal dollar resources do not necessarily translate equally in effect, there is no reasonable doubt that substantial funding differences significantly affect opportunities to learn. Money is clearly not the only variable affecting educational opportunity, but it is one that government can effectively equalize. The court held then that the education funding system, with its wide disparities in revenue available to school districts, deprived children of an equal educational opportunity, which was a violation of Vermont's Constitution. The court also held that their ruling did not require absolute equality of funding. Quote, equal opportunity does not necessarily require precisely equal per capita expenditures, but it does not allow a system in which educational opportunity is necessarily a function of district wealth. To fulfill its constitutional obligation, the state must ensure substantial equality of educational opportunity throughout Vermont.
Now, the crux of this, of course, is going to be that I do believe there is something to be said for, school choice again would be like the ultimate, in this case. But how are they applying this? Because I'm going to bet that the equity discussion in Vermont is not just about there's some really rich school districts and some really poor school districts, and that's really unfair to the students in the poor school districts, which brings up why don't they just choose which school they can go to. I'm going to bet they're going to bring it back to race or other immutable characteristics at some point. So let's just make sure we're really understanding what they mean when they say equity, and how are they applying it, because I might be okay with the discussion about there being extreme disparities in how the different school districts are funded and the impact that has on all children within the poorly funded schools versus the children in the richly funded schools. I might be okay with that discussion. I'm not okay when you're bringing race and other immutable characteristics into the discussion to create subsets within the schools. And Sin is reminding everyone to please mount that like button. Thank you, Sin, for the reminder. I always forget to tell people, mount the like button, subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much.
Very shortly after that decision, I believe that decision came down in December or January. And by the end of that legislative session, the legislature passed Act 60.
Great. Thank you, Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
Ted, could you give us a overall description of what the pupil weighting study is for those who aren't familiar with it? And also, could you touch on how current education funding formula works, along with helping all of us understand what the excess spending threshold is?
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking time to join us in this discussion. Those topics, Kendra, that you just mentioned, of course, could be subjects for a very lengthy discussion, but let me see what I can do to give you a thumbnail sketch of some of the key aspects of that. By the way, just
Sam is making a note, and I think it's an interesting point. Sam says New York is the highest per pupil cost, but quality is 12th. Yeah, well, I mean, in New York, they have this teacher tenure is crazy everywhere, but it's especially crazy in New York, isn't it? Am I wrong about this, Sam? Where I remember, does anyone remember the documentary Waiting for Superman? Where they literally in New York City, they literally just have like rooms full of like teachers that basically will never ever teach again ever, but they just send them to these rooms to like sit all day in these rooms and they still pay them as teachers. Crazy. Yeah, money isn't everything, but sometimes money does matter, like when you don't have basic necessities.
just again as background, I have had some background over a number of years with education at many levels. I'm very passionate about education because I've seen what it can do for so many people. My main expertise, of course, is in the financial domain, but I'm in this role because I'm intent on using my financial skills to help progress and advocate for high quality education for students throughout the state of Vermont. And I feel very privileged and fortunate to be in that role. But to answer your question, the weighting study, which was issued at the end of calendar year 2019, in December of 2019, was a study
Every
that was
school
commissioned by the
district, hang on, this is
legislature.
a really great point Spirit Matter is making. Every school district has a YouTube channel. We need, and this is really where I think happy hour is going to be focused moving forward, and certainly where the Unwoke Army is going to be focused moving forward. I think, there are a lot of places that you can fight back against woke insanity, and of course, there, like in the book, I cover corporations, government, culture, and the schools. But what is dawning on me in this whole experience in the last couple of weeks is that we need to be looking at what every single school district is posting on their YouTube channels, because a lot of them, again, they're doing it right out in the open and no one is looking for it. So that's, something that I'm really thinking about right now.
Which recognized that there were some issues with the approach that had been used to allocate educational funding throughout the state. And as many people know, and I'll summarize briefly, the same basic formula and set of weights that had been set up more than 20 years ago, and which presents some challenges in operations, but was operating adequately, one might say. Nevertheless, was using weights and factors that were never significantly revised over that 20 years plus. And of course, during that time frame, as everybody knows, there have been major shifts in demographics, major shifts in the costs, different costs.
And by the way, do not wait for people like us to look at your school district's YouTube channel. Look at, if you have kids in school, look at what they're doing online. Look at their websites. They will quite literally tell you every single thing that they're doing, because they assume, like Fuzz Warmy is making this, they assume that everyone agrees with them. They assume that everyone is completely on board with all this equity bullshit. So they are proud of it. They're bragging about it, guys. Look at your school district's YouTube pages. They all have one. Patrice says the Utah Board of Education is very interesting to watch. I bet a lot of them are very interesting to watch.
Go up at different rates, and that makes a big difference over the course of a couple of decades. So the legislature wisely chose to request a team of outstanding and highly recognized academics, including Professor Colby from UVM and
Highly
Professor
recognized
Baker from
academics.
Rutgers, to go ahead and undertake an objective study to understand what changes might be needed in the weights that are used for that funding formula. And recognizing that the Agency of Education has the primary charge for administering and managing that formula based upon standard sets of data that have been used, over the course of the 20 years, and unfortunately without any changes in those weights. So what I would say,
I just want to say, Fuzz Warmy says UVM has gone nuts. UVM has gone nuts. In fact, if you go back to some of the early happy hour videos on this channel, you will see I was watching UVM videos in very early happy hour videos. And I was actually thinking today that we need to go back and look at UVM again. And I'm kind of making this note for the Unwoke Army. If someone could please make this note in the Discord, because I'm just not thinking about it right now. Like, we need to go back and look at UVM as well. UVM has a whole Office of Equity. They do whole equity workshops. Remember Aaron Kinesvatter, who was the whistleblower from UVM? He might actually be able to give us some additional insight on what's going on there. Maybe we should even have Aaron come and talk to us one-on-one about our experiences. I'm sure he'd do it. So UVM is another thing that we need to definitely look into.
is I think most people who have taken a look at the study, many people who have commented on the study would describe it as very thorough research, a very robust data analytical report, and one that uses very sound statistical modeling. I've had the opportunity to listen into some of the task force hearings, as well as some of the legislative testimony that occurred earlier this year. And in the times when I've had the opportunity to listen to those commentaries, the comments I've heard about the study have all been highly complimentary, both in terms of the methods used and how the results and the recommendations were developed. Of course, as is the case with any complex area, and in this case, a complex study, using it and applying it properly and correctly does require a great deal of care, understanding, and in some respects, understanding of statistical issues, policy issues, educational issues. So suffice it to say, when you read through the 150 pages of the report and its various statistical tables, that is not a light read, and it does require careful consideration. The flip side of that would be to say, if one does not exercise that type of care, it could be very easy to reach incorrect conclusions because of, again, how holistically things are developed and how the models and the recommendations were provided. One of the things that I think the study team did that was excellent is, instead of taking a shotgun or a scattered approach, they did the research to identify 5 to 6 key drivers of educational costs. And they worked on that through their research and ultimately used those factors as the basis for their modeling. And I think most people would agree that that was a very important approach that provided the soundness and integrity that most people believe exists there. In terms of the present formula itself, I've been in my position for about 1.5 years. As I mentioned, I have an extensive financial and quantitative background. I will tell you that the process that the AOE in the state of Vermont uses is complex, and it does require careful attention to detail. My colleagues at the AOE do what I consider to be an admirable job of making sure that, you know, those statistics, and there's quite a variety of them.
Oh God, this guy is the most long-winded person ever.
Timely,
get to the point.
And,
no one cares.
When revisions are necessary, they work very hard to get
Make
that through,
the point.
with the objective, of course, of doing the best job possible in any given year to apply the metrics that will be used to allocate, obviously, hundreds of millions of dollars of educational funding across the state. So it works well. It's not easy, but at least it's consistent.
I'm falling asleep over here. I'm sorry.
Opportunity for improvement.
I'm falling
in the
asleep.
Formula by updating these.
He's not even saying anything.
And implementing
he is saying nothing of substance.
The recommendations of the weighting study, which is why it's a good thing for everyone in the state that the legislature decided earlier this year to create the task force that's been working so hard since the summer to develop an action plan in terms of how one might best implement that formula with all of the change management issues that are naturally involved with such a complex area. Briefly, in terms of the excess spending threshold that you asked about, Kendra, I would say that like many aspects of the present funding formula, it was developed with good intentions, and it had admirable goals. or at least one could say that. You know, an excess spending threshold is a threshold that is set to say, well, if a district just decides to spend unnecessarily large amounts of money just because they can and they want to, the state's going to say, well, wait a minute, in the interests of trying to keep the playing field somewhat level, if we think, and I'm going to use just an example of simple numerics to make the point, if we think that the average cost per student should be in the range of $20,000 per year, and
No.
if a district were to decide to go way past that and spend $25,000 or $30,000 per year, then the excess spending threshold is a way for the state to say, well, we want to give you some disincentive for overspending unless you really think it's necessary. So we're going to have a penalty with some additional fees that are owed to the state if you blow through that excess spending threshold. So one can argue, well, that's a way to try and accomplish some balance across the state. Unfortunately, because of the mechanics of that threshold, it probably, in my opinion, and I think you could find others who would agree, it probably has not been updated the way it could have and should have been, much like the weights themselves. And the problem that has created is in districts such as the Rutland City Public Schools, where I work.
That's where
we
Sticks
have a
went,
high
I think.
percentage of students from low-income families or coming with other issues. It requires a higher level of spending per student to provide the services that they need. You'll oftentimes hear teachers and administrators speak in terms of the most effective education is for us to meet the student where the student is when he or she comes into the school system. And as you can appreciate, you know, many students come at different points, depending upon the nature of their experiences. Some are very familiar with computers and take the technology quickly. Others have perhaps not seen a computer and so need additional support. So those are simple examples of we can get into later where it doesn't.
And I'm going to
cost the
stop
same
you right
amount.
now because I know we have
Thank
a lot
you.
of questions, and I think
Sorry
people
about
Oh,
that.
thank
getting the
God.
gist of what that
Thank
was. And
God.
So I appreciate
Great.
your
Thank
explanation, but I
God.
just want to be sure we get time for the other questions.
Sure. Sorry about that. Thank you,
No,
Kendra.
it's very helpful. So Laura, I was really hoping, you've been very active on this issue, and I'm wondering if you could talk with us about how you first came to this work, including passing the pupil weighting study in 2018, and then the eventual passage of S13 that led to the creation of the legislative task force.
Sure. So this is an issue like Ted that I care really that I care a lot about, public education.
Well, okay, Sam is making a salient point that I think flew over my head because I was so bored I was almost falling asleep. And that's actually part of the problem, right? That is part of the problem with this entire thing is it is so boring to listen to this shit and to watch this shit all the time that people just give up. They say, uncle, they say, I don't care, just don't make me suffer anymore. But Sam says he wants Vermont to go from $9,000 per pupil to $25,000 per pupil. Huh. That doesn't seem to, and this was November of 2021. So this is like not that long ago. That's a lot.
Thing that I have had a front row seat to.
That is almost a 200% increase. I think I did that math correctly. That is almost a 200% increase over where they are today.
Seeing the inequities in our district and in the adjacent districts to us. Sorry, my husband has just stepped in here. So
this is
my
so Vermont
apologies.
right now. You have no idea. This is so Vermont.
So I've been following this long before I was in the legislature. And in fact, this propelled me into the legislature. It was an issue that it was very clear to see that Act 60 was not working as it had intended. We knew that something was wrong. We, in our region in Southern Vermont, worked together to try and conduct different economic analysis, to have lobbyists help us try and raise this issue in the legislature. I myself went and testified a number of times about this issue, and we kind of just got stiff-armed and really frustrated. And the situation was not kind of static. in our region. We could see, in addition, with this system that was inequitable and making things worse, we were also seeing population decline and an increase in poverty, which are two things that really will exacerbate this type of situation. So when we came into the legislature, when I came into the legislature, I worked with, there are a number of legislators actually who had a sense that this system was not operating equitably. We were trying to push things like chart of accounts, helping us understand what we were spending money on, trying to get
They
after
haven't even
what are the
defined
differences
equity
that we're
yet, by the
seeing
way.
and-
They
and
haven't
how,
defined any terms. So how
is
do
that
they know
translating
if the
to education
system
for
is
kids?
operating equitably or
So
equitably? They haven't
we
defined any terms.
Eventually, we're able to, working with Dave Sharp at the time, who was the chair of House Education, we were able to, their committee believed that the weight for poverty was not correct. Myself and a number of others had been fighting to retain small schools grants, pushing for the sparsity, and so their committee decided that poverty was underweighted and that we needed to do a study, and that was great news. And that began kind of a series of events of trying to get something passed. And so we amended bills to try and force the issue. They eventually brought one out. And in 2017, we passed it. Secretary Holcomb at the time, Rebecca Holcomb was the secretary, pretty consistently told the legislature that if there was no money, there would be no study. Those of us who had been hoping for this analysis to be conducted said, no, we passed the study, the governor signed it, and you got to do it. We threatened to sue. And the legislature came back into session and appropriated.
AD says the windbag alluded to how they would treat richer districts equitably by punishing them for overspending the poorer districts monetarily. I did definitely catch that. And I thought that was an interesting component, and I'm not exactly sure how that applies to equity as we understand it. But I will say that I did catch that point where they said that if school districts are caught like needlessly overspending, then they'll be penalized in some way. But I want to know what they mean by equity. I'm still waiting because I'm getting the impression right now that these people don't really know what that means.
Some money for it. And so it came forward. The results, the study was finished. I actually heard from a reporter on Christmas Eve in 2019 asking if I had seen it, had just come out. And it was such a relief to see and know that we were not crazy. And then it was really upsetting to think about and to be able to quantify the harm that had happened, not only
The
to
harm.
our kids.
What is the harm?
But to kids in all of these districts.
What is the
around
harm?
the state, and to be able to see the magnitude of the harm. So a number of legislators that had been following this issue, we introduced legislation.
Okay, P.S. Like, I know for an absolute fact, like, I went to high school 1995 through 1999. I graduated in 1999. This is in 2021. This issue about inequitable distribution of funds in Vermont schools was not unknown 20 years ago. And so I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding why this was such a surprise to anyone that's been working on this issue when, as a high school student in the late 90s, I knew this. It wasn't a mystery. So what is, and the reason I bring that up is, what is the real goal? What is the real problem? Because this woman who is a state legislator, there we go, got there eventually. This woman who's in this state, who is in the House of Representatives of Vermont, seemed shocked that there was inequitable distribution of funds in Vermont schools. I'm sorry, any school child that I went to school with could have told you that. AD Karlyn, it's how all these people's idea of equity is make the forest the same height by cutting down all of the taller trees. Yeah, no, I totally understand that, AD. I'm just wondering, like, I think the point that I really want to look for, like, what is her real goal? And I'm specifically interested in her, Laura, because she has the power to budget things in the state house. What is her real goal? What is her real motive? This is the question we need to be asking.
H 54, which basically said, put these in place. It's not that hard. We have, this is how we correct the existing system so that it delivers equity. It's not difficult. We already use weights. We'll do this. We understand, the weights are, the weights are how we ensure that we're dividing any size pot of resources equitably according to need across the state. And so
equity according to need. Okay.
Not properly calibrated.
So the definition of equity is according to need, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Who said that? Who said that? From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. That might not be the exact quote, but it's that basic gist. Who said that? Pop quiz in the chat right now. Marx! Yes! Yes, that's Karl Marx. That is Karl Marx. That is Karl Marx. That is Karl Marx. Everyone gets a free bingo square that got it right. See, I changed the rules for bingo throughout the stream just to keep myself interested. Everyone gets a free bingo square. Who knew it was Marx? So we have now a state legislator in the House of Representatives of Vermont literally advocating for Marxist ideology. Okay, I think we're starting to suss into what the real goal is here, aren't we?
Recalibrate them. We understand doing that creates shifts, can create shocks in the system, much like Act 60 itself created shocks in the system. And we've been advocating for dealing with and addressing those shocks. We can't just have districts that have been benefiting from this inequity for 20 years. All of a sudden, no matter how unfair that was, it wasn't their fault. It was the system. So, we have a responsibility to ensure that there's some stability in correcting the system. So H 54, it was a really tough, sledding to try and get that passed. I will.
AD, thank you for the super chat. As a reminder, guys, super chats do help support the channel, and I greatly appreciate them. It is the state's job to equalize funding for school districts that are poorer than richer ones based on property taxes, but that scheme hasn't worked. No, it definitely does not work in Vermont. It does not work. Does not work at all. And again, I actually, Sin says, what is Laura's last name? Sibilia, Sibilia. Again, I actually don't have a problem with them having a conversation about how do we level out funding per pupil by school district, because that is a legitimate conversation to have. There are some towns in Vermont that are very wealthy. There are a lot of towns in Vermont that are really, 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 really not. And so I do actually understand that to a certain extent. It's not like they have school choice or anything. But that's not what she's talking about, I don't think.
I'll say that my colleagues and I in the House had an extremely robust conversation about that bill, as well as what eventually came over from.
Yeah, Warm Fuzzy's making a great point here. They could do it via vouchers. If you want to bring equity to the schools, vouchers. Or school choice. That's another way. Just give people the choice of where they want to go to school.
From the Senate, which was this study for implementing the weights. This study, S13, to implement the weights, is what brought us this task force. In the spirit of compromise, those who were greatly alarmed by the potential shift, had asked to look at categorical aid, which could also help mitigate that shift in resources, but by increasing taxes, and a number of different items where the task force was asked to look at. But it is the task force for implementing the weights. So this task force has been meeting. We have a number, I have a number of colleagues on here. The folks that have been, that were named to this task force, they're, the folks in the House are deeply, deeply aware of this issue. As I said, we had a very robust conversation. I would say much more so than the Senate, which is what I believe one of the challenges that we're facing. The Senate has a lot less members. And
Democrats control the Senate in
tackle
Vermont with a
twice as
supermajority.
many issues, and so they just don't go as deep. And so that's challenging when you have an issue that presents as much challenges as this does. So task force is working, and we will. They're not proposing to implement the weights at this point. They are proposing cost equity, which is something I think we'll be hearing about a little bit later. I would not say that that is the same thing or will have the same effect. So happy to be here tonight. I really appreciate all of the folks that have been working so hard on this. It really, really matters. I mean, investment in our kids is really, it's how we should be measured. So thanks, Kendra.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks for that great legislative update. It's appreciated. You talked a lot about the harm, and I want to kind of go back to that because a lot of you on the panel are coming from districts that are really struggling. And I want to see if you could speak to some of the issues that you're currently facing in your districts so that people have an understanding of what's really going on around the state. So anyone, if you can take that first.
I'll be happy to jump in, Kendra. So as noted earlier, I'm the chair of the Cabot School District, the board in the district. And, like a lot of smaller rural towns, we didn't have an easy run of navigating the Act 46 process. And we haven't had an easy run of navigating increasingly difficult and hostile education funding formula. To much to our embarrassment and makes bigger in WCX every time, Cabot has had a string in the past 4 years. We've only had a budget pass on the first vote once. Our voters have become incredibly resistant because of the excess spending threshold. It's viewed that we are somehow inefficient despite cutting staff at a rate greater than our decline in student enrollment and taking other steps to try to reduce costs that were either out of control or inefficient. One of the main drivers of this is we have fairly intense student need. Now, I'm not going to say that we're a district that has an abnormally high level of poverty. Our free and reduced lunch is above the state average, but it's not as bad as some of our neighbors in the Northeast Kingdom, unfortunately. But that said, we have approximately a quarter of our students that receive some form of a special service. And while there's state reimbursement and some of that money comes back, ultimately we have a student body that is taken all together, considerably more expensive to educate than other districts. And when we start talking about special services, we're not talking about funds that are discretionary. So the idea underlying Brigham that there are districts that just spend a lot because they want to have great things, because they want to have brand new buses, because they want to have new uniforms for their sports teams. These are luxuries we never talk about or think about. Instead, what it comes down to our discretionary spending is virtually non-existent because we're fully obligated to helping the kids we have and meeting them where they are. As put this in context, one of the terms I never thought I'd hear or need to understand was the concept of unavailable for learning. And in 2018 and 2019, our school was really in a crisis. I look and see some of the things going on right now in the Bristol School District and among others of huge behavioral issues. Cabot School went through that, and to meet that need, we had to make a substantial investment in behavioral interventionists and people who aren't even doing direct instruction, rather just trying to help students navigate the path. And I think for those of you in rural districts, you probably are familiar with this and know that our schools are more than just a warm place that's the fabric of the community. It is increasingly in rural areas the only type of social service and support that many young learners in need are getting. I know that there's stuff in our more urban districts. Schools are integral beyond just education. The final point I'd make is, putting this in context, we're rural, we have a fair amount of poverty, we have a fair amount of student need, and some of the things the legislature has done really are not necessarily helping. I know others will probably speak more artfully about Act 173, but our SU, Caledonia Central, is in position to lose over $500,000 in funding at a really critical time and for a critical population. And
Patrice asked, did he say it's costing more because they have to feed them? Well, it's probably like, so school districts that are poorer have like free and reduced lunch programs. But there's also, he's also talking about like behavioral interventions. So I'm starting to wonder, okay, I might, like, you guys let me know if I'm being too generous. I'm starting to wonder if this discussion might actually be a reasonable one around funding disparities between uber rich school districts and uber poor school districts and how they accomplish that, or if they're going to get to the race stuff at some point. I'm wondering. I really am. And like I said, I do have another presentation queued up because I wasn't sure exactly how this presentation was going to go. I'd like to stick with this one for a little while longer, but if it becomes clear to me that this is about like a kind of legitimate conversation, yeah, I'm a little suspicious. Part of me is like, this might be a completely reasonable discussion. And they've called it equity because they don't know what the word means. Now, we did definitely hear Laura say something completely Marxist. Like that was a completely Marxist ideology. But like it like part of me is like, this actually seems kind of reasonable and I'm not actually that offended by it. And part of me is like, does it seem too reasonable? What's really going on? So I want to stick with this for just a little while longer because I want to see where the discussion goes, but I'm also ready to jump ship and to watch something else. Yeah, whenever a woke conversation seems reasonable, that is definitely suspicious. See, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm like, what's going on? What is the hidden agenda? Why do I find this too reasonable? But again, I also understand the problem that they're describing in Vermont. I'm just a little bit shocked that it took them until 2021 to assess the problem when I assessed the problem in 1998 as a freaking 17-year-old.
I think the biggest issue with that is Act 173 is still based upon a child count in districts, not the actual need or the number of students proportion of that district that are availing themselves or need special services. And so it's incredibly important to a small district like Cabot that we get weighting right, not because we want to spend in our jest or give a tax break to our taxpayers. We need to have the flexibility to meet the needs of all of our students, including those in poverty and including those who are not and are not engaged in special services. So long as we can't equitably access these funds or not face penalty, it's incredibly difficult for us to meet our fundamental educational mission.
Rory, I'd love to jump in on what you said, because even though I'm from Winooski School District, it seems urban. A lot of our challenges are very similar in that way. Like,
oh, please.
I think when I ran on the school board, I said that our school districts are the heart of our community. And it is important that we're building that legislatively. And you can see what happens when you don't change the weighting formula over time. What happens is you truly get equality as opposed to equity. Right? And you assume that all the funding is going to be assumed. And what I mean by that is that, like, I got
ding, 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 ding. Alex knows the difference between equality and equity, doesn't he now? Alex just said the magic words. And here we go. The slow, slippery slide into the Marxism portion of the meeting. Let's just like listen to that again. Do you guys love how it was just like slid in there? And we were almost ready to give up. We were like, they're being completely reasonable people and we don't actually hate them. And we were like all ready to go on, watch this other presentation. And then all of a sudden, equality is not the same thing as equity. I'm sorry, what? And now we have to keep going. We've committed. Okay, let's rewind a little bit for anyone who wasn't paying attention to how that just happened.
Including those in poverty and including those who are not and are not engaged in special services. So long as we can't equitably access these funds or not face penalty, it's incredibly difficult for us to meet our fundamental educational mission.
Rory, I'd love to jump in on what you said, because even though I'm from Winooski School District, it seems urban. A lot of our challenges are very similar in that way. Like, I think when I ran on the school board, I said that our school districts are the heart of our community. And it is important that we're building that legislatively. And you can see what happens when you don't change the weighting formula over time. What happens is you truly get equality as opposed to equity, right? And you assume that all the funding is going to be assumed. And what I mean by that is that, like, I got to admit, the luxuries that you explained, I thought when I joined the school board, I thought it'd be like, got to save that art department, or like, how are we going to save the athletic department, right? We don't have the luxury of arguing about what mascot needs to be changed here, because when I started on the school board, we were talking about busing versus whether we needed to update our building because we had classrooms where students were in closets. Our bucket brigade was like stopping the rain from falling on the thing, right? Like, those aren't things that like any of us really expected to do when we were on the school board, right? Because those are the basic needs. But we also have different populations, and this is the demographics of that weighting formula has changed, that we know that like we're changing in Vermont. We have in Winooski multi-language learners. And even though there might be federal funds that actually might help.
Does anyone know what multi-language learner means? How might we translate when he's saying multi-language learner? When he says multi-language learner, I hear a marginalized, oppressed population. That's what I hear. They're talking about immigrants. They are. When I hear that, I hear marginalization, I hear oppression, and I hear Marx.
Those students, because schools are the center of our communities.
And by the way, just so I'm not taken out of context by any nefarious actors on the internet, I have absolutely no problem. I'm married to an immigrant. I have absolutely no problem with having discussions about how to serve children that come from immigrant households. I have no problem with immigration. I have no problem with any of that. That's not the point. The point is that they're going to start talking, I'm going to guess, about budgeting for people based on their immutable characteristics, and I'm not okay with that. Thank you, Fuzz Warmy, for the $1. I appreciate it.
It's how we grow. It's how we grow. We also have to provide all that wrap around that support. How do we handle the parents to keep them informed? How do we help like translation services to ensure that they are healthy? Because we also know that healthy students make great learners. And that's why Winooski has made those efforts. But every additional cost, this is where equality and equity is different, right? If we have the same amount, then that means we have to invest, we have to take away of investments from somewhere else. And we have in the Winooski school districts. We've taken away from potentially our teachers' salaries.
This is one of the most impressive demonstrations that someone actually knows the definition of equity that I have ever seen. They never are this clear about this. This guy has been trained to know precisely what the definition of the term equity is by the woke definition, which for people who might be just stumbling on the channel, you're not like, you know what, you don't do this every week with us. Equality is when everyone shows up and they get an equal opportunity. Equity is equality of outcome. They're trying to level out the outcomes across the board. It's about assigning people value based on the perceived need or their oppression or their marginalization or any of these things. Wow. I bet he picked that up at the University of Vermont too, if I'm being honest about it.
I've sat through school board budget meetings where I'm going like, we have to take away school supplies. And we're not a district that can like fundraise with the PTO or any of that and stuff. We could try to do the excess spending and all that and keep on spending more. But I remember, and I severely remember a gentleman saying, when we were going for the capital project bond, he goes like, yeah, Alex, you know, like what you all doing in Winooski is great. But he was a retired teacher and goes like, how am I going to stay in this district if we keep on increasing the tax rates? And that's the detriment of what happens when you have equality, is the fact that like we can't even keep our community together because we're forcing people out. And I think that's the detriment that I kind of want to make point about, like the harm that we've done is that, like, for a lot of us that are in this room here, is that we can't keep the basic needs of our students. And we're kind of like not building a community, we're forcing people out.
Thanks, Alex. So, Alex, you brought up a good point about kind of tax rates and property taxes and how we pay for this. And how does correcting the weights impact property taxes?
I appreciate that you asked that question, because I also have the joy, because we're a smaller board, of like presenting the financial budget to everybody in the town on town meeting day. And I think all of us, like, we have reasonable people, and you don't talk about from a weight, but you talk about a per people spending kind of formula in one way, right? And if I have to go up, if the weights are equalized, which is what they are right now, not adapted, and understanding that different students take more money, it may seem that our school district, and I think Rory actually pointed this out, seems like we're spending a lot of money per student. But it doesn't account for the actual cost of all the different types of students that we have. And so instead of being able to present a financial budget that, you know, that says that we're only spending $10,000 per student, which I know that all of our like people in our town would go like, we're down at that low, the bottom half of the school district. That's irresponsible of us, right? They see us spending $17,000, $18,000 per student. And they're going like, wow, we can't increase the tax rate. Like, how are you like spending so much money? How are you being inefficient in how you're spending money?
Incognito says the Vermont School Board Associations parrot this guy's definition of equity. Yeah, they all do. This is one of the things I've learned, just like poking around in like the last couple of days, and I haven't been posting as much in the Discord about this, but I really should be. Yeah, this is throughout the state of Vermont, throughout every major institution in the state of Vermont. We are going to find the same language and the same definitions parroted everywhere. And then it's a matter of like, how much have the schools actually implemented what they're all talking about?
And part of that is mainly because we probably haven't done even though we understand it takes more money to spend a different type of student, the system that we're in is not giving us that flexibility to spend what we should be spending for our students. And those are simple comments that I get when I talk to like the public, when I'm doing the financial thing. And once again, there are times where I really want to spend more, but I know that what will happen is that will drive people out, and even drive the people that I hope to have built the school for, right? And I gotta admit, I don't know where they can live.
Who'd you build the
anymore in
school
Vermont.
for?
That's what waiting does. The impact of changing the taxing capacity of our weights.
Thanks, Alex. Rory, you had talked earlier about Act 173, and I kind of want to go back to that just a little bit to see how the weighting study interacts with 173 for your districts, and this can be open to whoever wants to answer it. But I just didn't want to not address how Act 173 interacts with the weighting study.
I can start, and then others can pick up if that works. So for those of you who aren't super familiar with which acts mean what, Act 173 made really substantial changes to the way Vermont funds special education. So moving us from a reimbursement model where roughly 60% of your special education expenses were reimbursed from the state, to a census block grant model based on ADM, or student count, not weighted pupils. So there's no accounting for student need in the resources that you'll receive from the state to fund special education costs. And as part of the legislative deliberations on Act 173, I was with the School Boards Association at the time, and so was very present in many of those deliberations. It was widely recognized in the committees that implementation of a block grant to fund special education would negatively impact high poverty small districts, and that in the absence of doing something on the weights, it would essentially represent a transfer of resources away from small high need districts to larger districts who may or may not have the same level of need. And that was one reason why the weighting study was included as part of Act 173 in recognition of that fact. And the theory was that if the funding system as a whole better accounted for student need, then through weights, then the transition to the block grant would not result in a violation of Brigham. And so that law passed in 2018. Implementation has been delayed multiple times now. But FY23, so the year that we're all preparing budgets for, as we speak, will be the first year where we'll start to see the effects of implementation. And for Winooski, we're going to see in one first year a loss of $345,000 over what we budgeted for in reimbursements in FY22. And once fully implemented, we're going to see closer to over $800,000 less in revenue. And that's based on, a moment in time, which assumes that costs are.
I want to make a recommendation. I think that, so we've kind of gotten the idea in this one that they do understand the difference between equality and equity. I am not getting a sense that they're going to go down the uber woke rabbit hole in this. I really think that, listen, here's what I think has happened. I think that they are fundamentally doing like a wealth redistribution thing. But I also think that they're also trying to meet an actual need that exists in the state of Vermont. And again, I say that as someone who grew up in the state of Vermont and understands this. And I think that because Vermont is uber woke and uber progressive, I think like they're not crazy. Like, these people are not crazy, but I think it's one of those situations where these are useful idiots. These are idiots that are parroting language that's been given to them, where Alex definitely does understand the difference between equity and equality. I just don't think he's applying it in a woke way. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's woke for sure. Absolutely. 100%. I just don't think in this discussion, he's applying it in a woke way. So what I want to suggest, and I'll get the opinions of the chat, but we got another hour of this, or we could move on to something different to watch, which is the other thing that I have pulled up, and I will just pull it up and show it to you guys. So you know how we were looking into the schools for Burlington? Well, because we looked into the school system for Burlington, I've had people reaching out to me from Essex. Essex is one town over from Burlington. And Essex is also basing its education system on equity. And I suggest that we take a look at this presentation, which is from June 9th, 2021, the Essex, I think that's Essex Westfield School District, Essex Westford School District Equity Education Session. And this is Essex Westford School Director of Equity and Inclusion, Aaron, and guest Jillian, consultant, speaker, and author, held an equity session in June. We're moving on? Yes, we will move on. Now, and you know what? I want to emphasize, like, this happens sometimes, right? This happens sometimes when you're doing this type of work where you see certain keywords and you start going down a rabbit hole, and you just, at some point, you have to discover that, like, they're really not bad people. And I want to make sure that we always, let's give people the benefit of the doubt sometimes when they don't overtly seem like they're pushing woke bullshit. We watched that for a while. We gave it a chance. There's some there, but I think there's going to be more there, here. So we're moving on. Guys, please mount that like button if you haven't already. I haven't even had half of my beer. Not even at half of it. All right, we're all on board. We're moving on. We're going to move on to this equity education session from the Essex School District. Let's get the party started.
All right, we are now recording. So I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen.
We are too.
And welcome to the Equity in EWSD education session. I'm Erin McGuire. I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusion and Coach.
Oh, look, we already have a masked child. What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
Director of Student Support Services for the Essex Westward School District. And I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Jillian Boudreau, who will introduce herself in just a moment. We are going to first do a little bit of agenda review so that everyone knows and understands what we're here to do this evening. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to spend time with Dr. Boudreau learning a little bit about where we find ourselves as a community.
Yeah, this is gonna be much better.
This conversation about equity, we know, has not been easy. There are many of you here with many different perspectives and thoughts about this.
They're already talking about having tough conversations.
And as we move into conversations about this, Jillian is going to spend a little bit of time with us, helping us understand communities and we as individuals and how we interact with these concepts, as well as some of the
And by the way, guys, just so my Unwoke Army knows, I already have documents from the Essex School District. I just haven't looked at them yet, but I do have them. They're sitting in my email. So
concepts themselves that underlie the research related to equity work. We'll then move into a session with me related to equity work at EWSD, and I will spend time talking about why we're doing this, how we're doing it, and I will answer some of the frequently asked questions that are showing up about this topic. So with that, I would like to go ahead and just remind us of a few norms that I would ask you to consider as we're having this conversation. First, it's so important that we recognize and value our impact instead of our intent as we do this work.
Oh, good.
It helps us talk together across differences, and there are differences in this space, and so making sure you're aware of how you're impacting others is really important.
This is going to be much better
as we do this work.
Holy
we
shit.
Also want to use person first language, avoid labeling people and assigning people identity or ways of being or assumptions about them as a whole person. We are many things all at once. We want to recognize ourselves as beings that are complex and intersectional, and recognize that we are
intersectionality.
Please make sure you're only speaking for yourself as we go through this, and I would ask that you try hard to lean into discomfort while staying calm in this learning session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over.
All right. This is what a woke trading really looks like. Thank you, Jillian. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's not Jillian, Director of Equity. What's her name? Thank you, Erin, for giving us a good woke trading. We appreciate it. We do. Anytime they bring up intersectionality and talk about how this is going to be a tough conversation, and talk about how only impact matters and not intent, and talk about how you should lean into those uncomfortable moments and get ready to feel uncomfortable. We're about to get good and woke. Get ready for it, guys. Go get your popcorn, go get your beer, get your bingo cards out. Now's the time to go.
Over to Dr. Boudreau. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and she will get us started with our conversation tonight. Jillian.
Hello, thanks everybody. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm going to start with some remarks.
Look at that little old lady.
I too will kind of go into a
I love that little old lady. I wanted her to be wearing a fur coat.
First, I'll just
She kind of is.
So my name is Jillian. Jillian Boudreau. I'm a clinical psychologist and a school psychologist. I've been working in Vermont for the last 11.
She is a clinical psychologist and a school psychologist. Oh, what could possibly go wrong?
7 years. And I'm here to help us talk about race today,
Patrice.
And systemic racism in particular.
Oh, God. We're here to have the clinical psychologist talk to us about race and systemic racism. AD says, why are the woke so concerned about intent versus impact? Because if you take intent into consideration, that means that you have to offer grace and forgiveness to people who don't know why they offended you in the first place. But if it's just about impact, you can just go and say, you harmed me, you harmed me, you harmed me, and your intent doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you meant to harm me or not. You harmed me, and then they can get reparations or whatever the fuck. Yeah, let's look up her credentials. Her name is Jillian. I will put her name in the chat. Jillian Boudreau. Oh, that's not going to work in the chat. That's not what I wanted to do. I didn't copy. Wrong keys. Jillian Boudreau is her name, if anyone wants to look up her credentials.
So I understand systemic racism as being psychologically and emotionally damaging to both those who
AD, but that's not how it doesn't matter. AD, they don't give a flying F how due process works. It doesn't matter.
experience it, and to those who do not wish to perpetuate or see others harmed by it. So what that means, right, because I imagine that includes all of us on this meeting, is that everyone is probably going to have a hard time tonight. Strong feelings are expected, and we can work with them. We can work with them together. I am a psychologist, again, which means I do have expertise with human discomfort and what to do when it arises. So my main goal today is to help us expect that feeling.
This is so irresponsible for a psychologist to do on the fucking internet. Are you shitting me? This is incredibly irresponsible. She should lose her fucking license over doing this shit live on the internet to tell people we're going to have uncomfortable conversations live on the internet and you're definitely going to feel uncomfortable. But as a clinical psychologist, I will help you work through your discomfort live on the internet. This is unethical. Deborah, am I right about this? Because you're more of a clinician than I am. Like, I view this as extremely unethical what she's doing right now.
Things like fear and even anger may come up to help us stay engaged and keep our minds and hearts active anyway. I also aim to keep things as simple and clear as I can in describing my understanding of what is happening in our community and why it is happening. I also want to acknowledge the fact that there are 2 white women moderating our discussion today. When I was asked to join the discussion with Erin, I was really glad to do so. And the reason I wanted to was because I believe that learning and talking about systemic racism is in many ways white people's work, and that the task of describing the existence of systemic racism ideally should not always be the job of those directly impacted by it. That said,
oh shit. Oh shit. All right, Unwoke Army, we need to immediately start investigating the Essex School District right now. Let's get another thread, man. Let's make it 2 weeks in a row. Because if this is the woman they're bringing in to do the equity education session, oh my God. Deborah says, unless she has consent, and then it would even be questionable, the audience probably doesn't realize what's going on. So Deborah just confirmed my suspicion that this clinical psychologist is behaving grossly unethically. Grossly unethically. Wow. She literally just said that she was happy that there were 2 white moderators because she doesn't want to inflict emotional distress on people of color by having this tough conversation about systemic racism. You live in Vermont. It's like 94% white.
I also want to recognize that while this is going to be tough for all of us, there is particular pain and discomfort that may come to our community members involved in this discussion today of color as they engage in this discussion and hear what is said. I also want to own that my understanding of systemic racism is an ongoing process of being learned rather than being lived. I'd also really like to acknowledge this community and my place in it. I love this community.
Emphasize says, you get some white guilt, you get some white guilt, you get some white guilt. Yes, there will be lots of white guilt. We should have started with this one. I knew it. I had a funny feeling about this one. But, I felt like I was being responsible. I was like, we're going to go to the Equity Commission first. No, we should have started here. My mistake. I apologize.
Very much. So this happens to be the community that first took me in when I was brand new to Vermont as a full-time school psychologist in the Essex Junction schools 11 years ago already. And since then, I've been honored to walk with the teachers, families, and children of Essex Westford in lots of different capacities, be it doing psychological evaluation of students, consulting with teams on student needs, and especially learning alongside our educators and administrators as we work to implement practices like trauma-informed teaching and social and emotional learning that we hope are relevant and welcoming.
Ding, 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 ding. Social emotional learning buzzword. Yes.
Before I arrived in Vermont, I was a clinician in New York City as I worked on my PhD in clinical psych. As part of that, I had the opportunity to work in hospital settings where many, if not most of the patients, as well as the doctors, nurses, and staff, were people of color. I share that for context because I grew up a white kid in upstate New York. At that point in my life, I did not know anything about systemic racism. Not that I know a lot even now, right? I'm definitely still learning. And so that was an incredibly valuable and eye-opening experience for me to learn from the perspectives of those who did not grow up as I had, and to understand the direct impact, or to put it bluntly, trauma of systemic racism on children and families. Many families shared with me about the challenges they face for generations, including life in what are called food deserts, where fresh and healthy food is impossible to access, children being punished and excluded rather than offered treatment and support for learning difficulties or emotional challenges, and difficulty getting medical and psychiatric care, and often not being believed, listened to, or offered proper treatment even when they did get care. It was helpful, you may hear my son who's just come home, it was helpful for me to begin to understand systemic racism within a cultural context that was less predominantly white than what we often experience here. So the reason I share that is not to try to claim that I know more about this because I worked in New York City for 2 years, but is to say that I really understand that it may have been easier for me to learn about this quickly.
Yeah, Deborah just made a great point in the chat. She just admitted that she does not necessarily have the appropriate background or training for the current topic, which is another ethical no-no. You're not supposed to, like, people don't realize, like, so I'm not a clinician, so I don't, like, I try to play by the rules, but, like, I don't necessarily, like, for the psychology I do assessments in businesses, man. It's a completely different thing. Like, clinical psychologists play by a whole other fucking set of rules around licensure. And there's there's a whole ethical code that they're supposed to follow. She's already broken like at least 3 ethical rules that I can think of off the top of my head.
I was in a context that was not predominantly white, and I can really understand how in a predominantly white context like Vermont, these ideas can be more abstract. So part of what I hope to do today is make them a little bit more clear. So what is happening is that an equity policy has been put forth naming systemic racism, among other things, and seeking to acknowledge and address it. So systemic racism can be defined as oppressive systems affecting the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, and work. My understanding is that systemic racism traces a line from our nation's history of enslaving people based on the color of their skin, to segregation and exclusionary laws that came in after slavery was abolished, which made it more difficult for non-white individuals to go to school, buy a house, get quality health care, all the way up to the present day, where the lack of opportunities experienced by, at this point, entire family trees of people still dictate differences in the experiences of people in our nation according to skin color or directly related to skin color. So why is this happening, right? Why are we making such a big deal of equity in the school district? Well, systemic racism is still harming real Vermonters, including children in our community. One concrete example of this is in present day Vermont, comes from the Vermont Department of Health. And the data that while only 6% of Vermonters are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, 18% of the people testing positive for COVID in our state have in fact been Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So that shows that non-white individuals have been 3 times more likely to get COVID than should have been expected based on the demographics of our state. Our Department of Health writes that this happened because non-white individuals are more likely to have essential frontline jobs that couldn't be done from home and that required closer physical contact with the public, as well as jobs that offered less access to paid sick time. So my read of that is that people of color in our state are more likely to have more dangerous jobs and to be less likely to have paid time off, because if a person's family history is comprised of parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and beyond who have historically been blocked from buying houses, accessing generational wealth, and receiving high-quality education, then that person's current reality in 2021 is likely to be impacted by that. This equity policy and the conversations around it have brought us to a very intense moment in our community, and I'm approaching our work today with a lot of tenderness because of that. I'm also not surprised by this. Race is almost always more difficult for folks to grapple with when talking about injustice, compared with things like sexism, poverty and class differences, and disability rights. It is often scary and stressful to talk about race. I feel a little bit nervous right now, if I'm honest. I think part of why Erin asked me to join you all today is because I'm a psychologist who specializes in fear, and in particular, how to keep fear from turning into the type of anger that can cloud our minds and hearts. The very concept of race, that we are automatically
Dude.
different and in particular superior or inferior because of our skin color, that idea was set up to scare us and to divide us. Inherently, I believe we as humans actually understand that we are all basically the same inside. I think in our hearts we believe that. In fact, in our nation's history, our ancestors seem to get that so much that the concept of race had to be made up and taught quite actively in order to justify a new kind of American slavery where enslavement became something you could
The
be born
concept,
into,
hang
and that your
on.
children and grandchildren.
The concept of race, yeah, Diane heard it too. The concept of race had to be made up and taught. That is what just came out of her mouth. The concept of race had to be made up and taught. Let's just listen to that real quick, and I'm going to just put emphasizes. Thank you for the super chat. I'm not going to smear the white guilt so thick. I mean, she does seem to be a little light on it, if we are being honest. But let's just listen to that again.
And to divide us. Inherently, I believe we as humans actually understand that we are all basically the same inside. I think in our hearts we believe that. In fact, in our nation's history, our ancestors seem to get that so much that the concept of race had to be made up and taught quite actively in order to justify a new kind of American slavery where enslavement became something you could be born into and that your children and grandchildren could be born into because of an enduring physical trait that couldn't be changed. I come from white people.
Wait. Did she say that the concept of race was made up and taught, and then also say it was an enduring physical trait that can't be changed? How is it made up if it is also an enduring physical trait that can't be changed? Did you make up the enduring physical trait that can't be changed? Or is race real? She just completely contradicted herself within the same sentence. Did anyone else hear that? Am I making that up? AD says Eastern Africans are closer to Eurasians than West Africans genetically, but there is a large I don't know what that word is, AD, but I will take your word for it because you are knowledgeable about many, many things. That was a completely contradictory. Okay, I'm sorry. We need to listen. That was completely contradictory.
Hearts, we believe that. In fact, in our nation's history, our ancestors seem to get that so much that the concept of race had to be made up and taught quite actively in order to justify a new kind of American slavery where enslavement became something you could be born into and that your children and grandchildren could be born into because of an enduring physical trait that couldn't be changed.
Wow.
I come from white people. Many of us here, I think, today come from white people. And I actually find it comforting to imagine that my ancestors and the people in their daily lives may have been regular people who perhaps wouldn't have been on board with this type of mass enslavement, left to their own instincts, if race, and specifically the idea that dark-skinned people were simply more suited to captivity, hadn't been taught. That is my understanding of where skin color became such a critical issue for our nation, as it became the way we measured who was worthy of freedom and who was not. In the hundreds of years since then, my perspective is that all of us, regardless of skin color, have been set up and harmed by this construction of race to feel separated and anxious.
Race is now
All that to
constructed
say,
again.
Talking about race is going to make us feel scared and divided because it was originally built to do that. My aim today is to help us stay calm and connected as we walk through this difficult conversation so that we can work together and do our best possible thinking. So before I get to my scientific slides, I have one more piece to say
scientific
just from my heart,
slides.
which is that I know this community is full to the brim of good people who are kind and want to help children. And I've known that since I got here. I am starting from the assumption that no one who has taken the time to join this meeting is coming from a hope to oppress anyone, nor is trying to hold anyone back or harm anyone based on the color of their skin. One thing I've learned in my years in the Essex-Westford community is that we already know how to take on injustice and construct equitable opportunities for all. When I first moved here, I was so glad to find that inclusion for kids with disabilities was already standard practice, with folks working so hard to make sure that classrooms worked for all kinds of learners and doing their best to keep everyone together as much as possible. This was different from my experience in New York, where students with learning or developmental differences were often still grouped into separate classrooms away from their peers. I have also observed the many ways that this community tries to empower women and girls, working to recognize sexism and serving to raise strong women who expect to be respected and heard. I have had the great luck to grow with this community, to watch the huge progress over the last 11 years, and I'm sure beyond that before I even got here, as far as our collective understanding of things like poverty and trauma, and how to change our practices to be more fair to kids who have had those as part of their lived experience. There's always more to do, and this community has already shown its commitment to learning about injustice and changing how we do things to move the needle in the direction of fairness. So let me shift into what we know about fear and how to work with it, which means I need to look away from you a moment and share my screen.
This is total brainwashing, by the way. If she's going to give them, and like anyone with clinical psychology background, please like let me know if I'm completely incorrect about this, because again, I'm not a clinician. I do like psychological assessments, but like it strikes me that if someone is trying to get you to adhere to their belief system, a really good way to go about it is to first give them a presentation on, here's what it's going to feel like when you get every indicator from your body and your mind and your instinct that you feel uncomfortable and that this is not good information. And here is how we're going to override your natural instincts that are there for a reason, because this is a tough conversation and we need to lean into this discomfort. She's trying to bring this is psychological fuckery. That's right, Sin. This is psychological fuckery right here. We know it. I'm the fucking master of psychological fuckery. I know psychological fuckery when I see it. She's trying to bring their defenses down and to get them to override what all of their instincts are going to tell them is true, to accept her bullshit. This is psychological fuckery in action.
So if I had to pick, as you know, a person who's dedicated her career to fear, I would say that my major issue with fear is that it really blocks connection and that it blocks learning. So when fear is active, we are more likely to see other people as threatening. And our brain uses so much energy trying to protect us that it doesn't have very much left for clear thinking and problem solving. So it really is true. Decades of psychological research, which I'll go into, show us that humans struggle to think clearly or act in their best interest when afraid. So that's important for our work here today as we stay open and try to think well together. And that's also important as we consider how and why equity policies can help children learn. So, as we get into the research, it's very, very clear that a brain in a fear state is not at its best. We cannot access our full potential when we are afraid. So we know that chronic fear impacts both cognitive and emotional functioning. So we cannot think clearly and we cannot make healthy use of our emotions when we are stuck in fear. I'm going to say a very jargony statement now, which is that fear and anxiety also significantly shrink executive function and capacity for adaptive behavior. And you'll see there's a million citations on this.
AD says, I posted a study showing racial gaps are shrinking. Thank you for that, AD. I appreciate it.
We know that very well in the psychological literature. So what that means is that a brain in fear isn't great at doing those higher order, wonderfully human, proactive things like planning and organizing, like accessing social skills, like transitioning well, like being able to see the forest
You know
for the
what's
trees.
hang on. You know what is flawed about this entire thing is she is making the assumption that every single person on this webinar is going to be shaking in fear at the idea of talking about race, when there is actually no evidence that I know of that talking about race makes white people afraid. The only evidence is Robin DiAngelo says so in her book, and Robin DiAngelo doesn't provide any citations for it. This was like Robin DiAngelo observing her own lived experience and then projecting that onto everyone else. She's making the assumption that everyone here is going to be afraid. That's not correct.
Not great at adaptive behavior, like acting in one's own best interest, being able to do something that's difficult now because it's going to benefit us later. The experience of fear, at least in my own human body,
Yeah,
leads to
Patrice,
kind
she's
of a tunnel
creating the
vision
fear.
effect
She's,
that
hang
can
on.
laser focus us only on.
Patrice is 100% correct. She's actually creating the fear in this situation by talking. You're going to be afraid, and here's what's going to happen, and here's what happens when your brain is on fear. She's creating the fear in this situation where no fear need exist. Emphasize says, got to get those kids fearful and in my clinic. Oh God, I hope this. I cannot believe this woman is a practicing psychologist. My God.
Finding and neutralizing threat. And it turns out that once we're in that state, we lose all of our capacity.
Hey, AD, I am a qualitative researcher. Qualitative papers are great. I believe in qualitative research. I don't see a thing wrong with qualitative research, but the problem is in the application of it, because qualitative research is never, ever, 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 well, no, I'm going to say it, never, ever, 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 ever meant to apply to large groups of people. Qualitative research is meant to identify themes. It's meant to identify phenomenon. It's meant to create a theory about what might be happening. And then what you're supposed to do is do quantitative research or mixed methodology research to provide a larger data set that can be more broadly applicable to the larger population. But qualitative research is never meant to be broadly applicable to the larger population for no other reason than most of the time qualitative research has an extremely small sample size. But I believe in qualitative research. I love qualitative research. I think it's for me, qualitative research is the thing that allows you to identify what makes us human. So I'm a fan, but you have to apply it in the way it's intended to be applied. Yeah, Deborah says, let's make everyone traumatized. All right, Deborah, have a good night. Thank you for hanging out.
Capacity to learn and grow in other ways. So I like to think a lot about basic safety in this topic, right? So we need to access some kind of basic safety in our hearts and minds in order to unlock our brain's potential. And the way we do that is through connection. So when we are feeling connected and calm, we believe we're generally safe in the world. And more importantly, our amygdala, right, which is the part of our brain that governs our fight or flight response, can believe that we're safe in the world. When we are fearful, our amygdala is not great at distinguishing between what is a life and death threat and what is not. When we're fearful, the amygdala tends to assume that everything is a life or death threat. And as such, our brain begins to deliver all of the resources to the primitive ways that we might stay alive. And it leaves empty all of our wonderful brain structures where, if calm, we could access things like problem solving, perspective taking, and empathy. All that to say, when experiencing anxiety and fear, any human can lose their sense of basic safety. And that blocks non-emergent functions like learning and emotion regulation. I'm going to say one more time, I'm sure you're already with me. This is important for us, the adults today. That's also important for learners and ways that an equity policy can serve to reduce the ambient fear in a school building at large, which is going to help everybody learn better.
She just said that marginalized populations are constantly in fear of their safety when they're in school, and our job is to reduce that fear so that they can learn. Made an assumption there. It's not grounded in data at all either.
Let's see, I just need to move this. There we go. Belonging and connectedness are the key to feeling safe and smart, right? So that's what we know. We need to feel welcome and we need to feel connected for our brain to allow resources to get delivered to the parts of our brain that help us, act with grace and be as brilliant as we are. And there's a lot of evidence about that. So, one thing that we know from the therapist world, right? So I'm also a therapist at times, is that it actually doesn't really matter. To a degree, it doesn't really matter what kind of therapy a therapist is practicing, as long as there is a good relationship with the client. So that's research on something called therapeutic alliance, which basically says that, you can be doing some wonderful manualized therapy to the letter, right? You can be saying all the right words, but what actually makes the difference in whether a client gets better or not is how connected they're feeling to the therapist, right? Because we can't learn and change if we're not feeling connected. There's a corollary to the academic world on that. So there's also research that interpersonal connectedness at school plays a big role in academic motivation and success. So I've spent a lot of my career just really
Yeah, I was
repeating
thinking the
myself, and I'm
same
sure
thing.
annoying
Yeah,
the heck
I agree.
out of Essex Westford teachers, in letting them know that even if we just focused on relationship at school, learning would actually happen faster. So in a way, we are already moving toward our academic goals when we focus on belonging and connectedness, because safe brains are smart brains. So
Hang on, emphasize with the super chat. Thank you. Emphasize. Oh my God, weaponizing love bombing against BIPOC. Oh my fucking God. Yeah. Thank you. Emphasize. Yes, that is it. Some forms of therapy are absolutely more effective than others. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the only form of therapy that has actually been proven to be more effective at actually producing behavior change. So there are some forms of therapy that are 100% more effective than others.
basically, as humans, probably as mammals, we got to have connection to unlock basic safety. And we got to have basic safety to unlock our full capacity.
That's
to
not
think.
true. That's not true. I disagree.
So fear really takes up a lot of our mental bandwidth, and it causes us to make more shortcuts. Our brain is trying to help us. It knows that we have way too much to manage. There's way more sensory input every day that, if we fully noticed every piece of sensory input every day, we could never function, right? So the brain is always categorizing, making shortcuts, sort of giving us the Cliff's Notes, as they say. And stereotyping and implicit bias are ways that we can...
Incognito with a little bit of trivia. She's on the Metropolitan Board Project for Research of Equity and Transforming Schools. Huh. I put the link in Discord. Thank you for that, Incognito. I wonder what the Metropolitan Board Project is. That might be another rabbit hole. Incognito, this week you have given us two very, 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 very valuable rabbit holes to go down. Thank you for your service, my friend. Well done. Good job.
Without knowing it, sort of turn away from or make negative assumptions about people, categories of people with whom we have fear associated, right? So the thing about race in our country is that it is associated with fear. And to some degree, it teaches us to fear one another based on the color of our skin. So that means that, for one thing, the more stressed an individual is at any given moment, the more likely they are to fall prey to implicit bias and stereotyping, right? The more likely their brain is to kind of take over and make those shortcuts. And also, mental shortcuts made from fear are more likely to be negative because fear tells us everything is a threat.
True.
So there's research from a few domains that I'd just like to note here. There's a lot of research on this, but I've hit the highlights. So physicians, right? When physicians face stress, their implicit biases have been found to shape medical decisions in ways that disadvantage stigmatized patients. So
NYU?
That would mean women, that would mean people of color.
We also, by the way, so Incognito says this project is at NYU. I definitely want to look into NYU, but guys, I've been looking into the land of Kendi, also happens to be my alma mater. There's shenanigans going on at Boston University. They've got all sorts of crazy shit on. There's several YouTube channels they have crazy shit on. I know it's not related to what we're working on right now. I'm just kind of making a mental note. And probably because it's like my alma mater, I was looking into it. But Ibram X. Kendi also has a $20 million anti-racist center at Boston University. There's going to be lots of crazy shit on there. Just saying.
There's also a study that racial biases among preschool teachers show that we may be more likely to punish those who look different from us, mostly because we are keeping a closer eye on those who look different than us. And we are more...
Racial biases among preschool teachers indicate we may be more likely to punish those who look different than us among preschool teachers. So what she's saying is that preschool teachers are racist. That wouldn't actually surprise me if I'm very honest about it. It would not surprise me to learn that liberal progressive preschool teachers turned out to be racist. That would not be shocking to anyone, I think, on watching this webinar.
Likely to notice if they misbehave because we're keeping a closer eye on them. I exist a lot in the world of diagnosis of children. And so this third one is a really important finding for me. First, I'll just read it and then I'll tell you my interpretation of it. So autism tends to be underdiagnosed among Black and Hispanic children. So that means we are slow to recognize autism in children of color, while oppositional defiant disorder tends to be overdiagnosed in children of color, right? So if we were to see a white child and a non-white child demonstrate the same behaviors, the research shows that even a well-meaning psychologist such as myself is at risk of more often deciding that the white child has autism and the child of color has oppositional defiant disorder. This is a big problem because in our society, autism tends to come with treatment and support, whereas oppositional defiant disorder tends to come with punishment and containment. So one way that implicit bias can work in my field, right, is that we're much more likely to decide that a white child with certain behaviors needs help and support, whereas the same child, same Black or brown child with the same behaviors, we're likely to decide, whoa, that kid needs punishment and containment. Big, big problem as far as later outcomes, right? So yet another way that systemic racism is still alive, even and especially in my own field. I also want to talk to us about stereotype threats. So for me, this is really where the rubber meets the road as far as how can an equity policy possibly help children learn? So stereotype threat, this research is so cool to me because it actually, I think it's quite relatable because it can impact all of us. So the deal with stereotype threat is that people in a stigmatized group will tend, there's a typo there, sorry. People in a stigmatized group will tend to show lower performance than they usually would in situations where they are reminded of a negative expectation of their own abilities or negative expectations about a group they identify
Hang
with.
on, we have a celebration in the chat. Steven got a bingo. Congratulations, Steven, on your bingo. Nice, now we're going for blackout bingo. I suspect it's not going to happen this week, but please, if you continue to get bingos in the chat, please shout out your bingos and we will celebrate you just as vigorously as we celebrated Steven's here. So congrats on that, my friend. And guys, please remember to mount that like button and subscribe to the channel. We do this every Friday at 5 p.m. So come and join us next week as well.
In plain English. The great thing about stereotype threat is that stigmatized group is very relative. So I'll give you some examples. Women, if put in a position where they're asked to do math, right? So, you know, historically, women have not been thought to be great at math. We as women know that, right? So if we are put in a position to do some math in a context where either we're reminded that a lot of people don't think women can do math, or if we are the only woman in a room full of men doing math, our performance is going to be worse than if we were doing the same exact set of math problems by ourselves. It's also true that if you tell a group of women that they are taking a math test, their performance will be worse than if you tell a different group of women with the same task that it's a set of puzzles. Even folks who are not normally thought of as marginalized can get into a stigmatized position and show stereotypes.
Is she telling us that women are afraid of math? I'm not afraid of math. Sin's not afraid of math. Sin's an engineer. If Sharon was watching, Sharon wouldn't be afraid of math. What the hell? Hang on. On the bright side, yeah, Gayla's not afraid of math. On the bright side, I'm about to finish this key lime pie beer, which doesn't actually taste like key lime pie, but that's okay. It was a delightful beer to drink. I mean, I'm actually getting a little buzz, probably because I haven't really eaten that much today. I probably should have eaten before happy hour. This is the time when the fatal flaw comes in. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna drink that thin mint beer too. Just because it was the second runner-up and that beer didn't really taste like key lime, we're gonna drink the thick mint beer, the Imperial Stout. This is a great idea because it is, I don't know if you guys can see, a 9.6% alcohol content beer. And I'm already buzzed. I should tell Victor to order a pizza or something. You know what I could really go for? Chinese food. Does anyone else feel like Chinese food? I don't know. I'm kind of feeling some dumplings. Maybe some sweet and sour chicken. It's nitro. It almost just exploded. Victor's probably watching the stream downstairs. He's already thinking about going to get Chinese food. All right, let's look at this thick mint beer. It's got the little can. This is how you know it's extra alcohol. This legit smells like a cookie. It smells like a chocolate mint cookie. It really does. I can smell the mint from like here. That is delicious. That beer, I have had this before. I remember now. That beer definitely tastes like a cookie. It tastes like a cookie. Wow. What a time to be alive. 10% alcohol content beer that tastes like a chocolate mint cookie. God, the things people can create when they don't have woke bullshit standing in their way.
Stereotype threat. So even white men, who we don't often think of as a marginalized group, show stereotype threat if they are asked to do math in comparison to Asian men, right? Because there is a stereotype that Asian people are great at math.
Wait, so she's saying that white men are afraid of Asian men? Is that what I just heard? Oh, Gayla's asking in the chat, what is it? It's Southern Tier Nitro Thick Mint. Anything by the Southern Tier. Southern Tier is so impeccable. Almost every single beer I've ever had from Southern Tier has been delicious. Honestly. But that's what it is. They have a s'more beer, they have a creme brulee beer, they have a pumpkin beer, they have pumpkin coffee beer. They've got, I mean, just like everything. They're the best.
So it also works there. And it also has, somewhat devastating findings as far as the impact on Black children and students when they are told that they are taking a test of intellectual ability. And this is what's so important for Vermont, if they are the only person of color in a room of white people, even if nobody has mentioned negative stereotypes, stereotype threat will be at work. I believe that's called the solo effect. I'm having a bit of a brain lapse. And that also happens for women, right? So,
you know what I could really go for right now? Hibachi. I haven't had hibachi in a long time. My birthday's coming up on Tuesday. Maybe I'll make Victor take me out for hibachi.
Those who are the only representative of a stigmatized group doing a task around members of a group expected to perform better at that task are very susceptible to stereotype threat. I love that finding because as I do this work, I will sometimes get the question, Jillian, there are barely any children of color in my classroom or in my school. Why is this important? How am I going to implement this, right? And actually, it's all the more important to implement these practices where someone might be in a position of being the only child of color or one of two children of color in a room, because that situation in and of itself may invoke stereotype threat and may make it harder for that person to demonstrate their full cognitive and academic potential. So how do we unwind all this? Well, again, stereotype threat is also related to the way that stress siphons off our mental bandwidth. And the way that we get out of that pattern is through belonging and connectedness. And
belonging and connectedness. It's funny because in 2019, I started getting a lot of requests for proposals for presentations about belonging. And I mistakenly thought, because this is before I had fully red pilled, I mistakenly thought that belonging actually meant you felt like you belonged. That's not what it means. It's all about diversity and inclusion bullshit. AD says these studies only seem to go in one direction. Well, that's because she's cherry picking studies, but it's also because, listen, people, researchers have to choose to research something for there to be a published study on it. So just because there's not a published study on something doesn't mean the phenomenon doesn't exist. It just means that no one has researched it formally and published an academic paper. So when academia is overwhelmingly woke, 95% of academia is woke, the studies are always going to go in one direction. Because in order for the study to exist, in order for the paper to exist that gets published in the journal that then gets published in the New York Times, someone has to take it upon themselves to do the study.
and connectedness require honesty and honoring complexity. I have some notes on this too, 1 second. So, we have to feel welcome in order for our brains to do their best work. Stereotype threat basically means that if we are holding the stress that we will be marginalized or unwelcome in a group, we actually perform more poorly.
Oh my God. The Revere asked, are you going to sign copies of books that are pre-ordered? So I can sign, I'm going to be offering an option for people to get a signed book plate from me, but there will also be autographed copies available. They're just not available yet, where they're going to be sold through premiercollectibles.com, but that will be available. Just not yet.
So if students of color in our community are telling us that they often feel marginalized or unwelcome in school, the data suggests that this is disproportionately impacting their ability to think and to access their full potential compared with students who may not be feeling that way, right? So our job is to make everyone feel welcome. And part of that is turning toward the difficult parts of everyone's story, including our collective story. And it is true that the history of students of color and the role of white people in that history has historically been disproportionately excluded from the conversation in our schools. There's been a lot of talk about critical race theory, and we will absolutely get to that in the Q&A. I have a few things I want to say in general. So for one, I'm an expert in fear, and I am learning to be as anti-racist as I can.
Oh my God.
I am not an expert on critical race theory. It's also my understanding that critical race theory is really more of a framework and less, let's say, a psychological or an educational way of moving through the world. But what I do understand about it is that it is a way of being honest about the role that race and racism and privilege have had throughout our history.
No, that's not what critical race theory is. That is not what critical race theory is at all. She is ill-informed. She is acting incredibly unethically right now and giving a presentation about something that she does not understand what it is at all in any way. Emphasize says weaponized love bombing equals virtue signaling. That's exactly right, Emphasize. I really like the way you put that. Well done. Guys, just so you know, if she calls it a framework, okay, what is the actual framework then? Because a framework should be able to be illustrated in a couple of simple steps or a graph. A framework is extraordinarily simple to illustrate. I'll give you an example. A leadership framework. I'm writing a proposal for a company to do leadership training for them this weekend. So a leadership framework is you develop a vision, you generate buy-in for that vision, and then you execute on that vision. That is a framework. It is a 3-step framework. And there are other things underneath that framework that make it like, it's not as easy as like 1, 2, 3. There are other components in it, but that is a framework. It is something that puts an easy way to succinctly understand what you're doing. Critical race theory does not have that at all. AD says these consultants make $5,000 an hour. They make more than that, AD. Okay. Do you guys want to be disgusted by how much money you can make when you're doing corporate training? My day rate is anywhere. I am not as well paid as some of these consultants. My day rate when I'm doing organizational psychology is anywhere between $8,500 a day and $12,500 a day. Now, Ibram X. Kendi, we've watched presentations from Kendi on this channel. Ibram X. Kendi, 1 hour keynote, $25,000 and up. Not even 5,000. You can there and there are people that make significantly more than that. You can charge significantly more than that. It just depends on the right event. For real. Robin DiAngelo makes way more than $15,000 an hour. I will tell you that right now. Maybe not anymore, but like a couple years ago, Robin DiAngelo, I would have been shocked if Robin DiAngelo was not making at least $25,000 for 1 hour of presentation. Yeah, man, corporate training is like, it's lucrative. It's really effing lucrative. That's why I always laugh when people think that this is my grift. This is not my grift. YouTube is not, I hate to break it to you guys, I have made $57.99 in super chats on this entire stream. This is not my grift. This weekend, I will be writing a proposal for the thing that actually is my grift. Like it is so absurd to me when people call me a grifter for doing this. Like, do you really understand how much money is in corporate training? It's ridiculous. And I happen to be really good at it, but I'm not like, I can't charge what like Kendi charges because it's all about the name. It's not even about what you're teaching, it's all about the name. So,
and in particular that continue to impact people right now. So as a psychologist, all the time I hear people want to just move through the pain, right? Like, I just want to get over this. This is fine. Like, we're good now. It's okay, right? That can happen in friendships and families. People always just want to move past it, move past it. We want to come together. If we talk about the hard stuff, it'll create more separation. It's a really natural way to feel. What my training tells me.
And by the way, I just happen to be really fucking good at my grift. I just can't talk about it online anymore because I'll get effing canceled from all the gigs I have lined up. And I do actually still work in this area. Believe it or not, I just don't talk about it online. But like, it really burns me. Like, the reason I bring this up is I'm really fucking good at this. I'm really good. And it really burns me when people like fucking Kendi and D'Angelo make ridiculous sums of money for doing essentially no work. ED says the real grift is grievance studies degree to DEI administrator pipeline at taxpayer expense. No, if I'm hustling with my corporate training stuff, I make more than any DEI person ever. So no, I mean, I think, the corporate training grift is real. Like, and a lot of the DEI people take advantage of it. But you know, it is a grift. It absolutely is. Like, people like Kate Slater. Kate Slater is doing just fine. I actually don't know if Kate Slater is, because Kate Slater is doing, she's like assistant dean of students at Brandeis. I mean, I would be shocked. I mean, Kate Slater maybe is making entry six figures, maybe like $125,000, maybe at that Brandeis job. Nothing compared to what D'Angelo and Kendi are making. Nothing. Yeah, it's a good idea not to talk about it. I can't. I'll get fucking canceled. But I just had, okay, I'm going to say this because we're over 2 hours into the stream. I had a fucking great meeting with a potential client this week. Holy shit. And they even watch my YouTube channel. And I'm really excited about working with them. I'm writing a proposal for them this weekend. It's like, sometimes what I've learned is like libertarian clients or more conservative clients, A, they're much easier to work with. B, they don't care about any of this stuff. Libertarian clients are the best to work with. But conservatives can be okay too. But, anywho, let's get back to it. Enough gossip.
Is that actually, yes, we all want to move forward, and we all want to move forward in a connected way and without separation, and turning toward, certainly not replacing some of the lovely parts of our history with only the dark parts, but really recognizing that they both exist, that we're a complex society with a complex history. That honesty is what can help an individual move through an individual trauma. And that is also what can help a community, and I would say a nation, move through the long collective trauma that this construction of race has provided for us.
Wow.
I have a couple strategies for today.
Oh, fuck her. Fuck her right off. Okay, this is where the beer is going to start kicking in. Just so you guys know, I am actually reaching the stage where I'm definitely buzzed. I'm sure that was impossible to tell. I have written a whole fucking book about mindfulness. So if she wants to talk about mindfulness and apply it into why you should accept critical race theory is real, I am sorry. I'm going to tear this woman apart. I wrote a whole fucking book about this stuff. Also something that I'm really good at.
In addition to belonging and connectedness, mindfulness helps, both with talks about race and for people who would otherwise experience stereotype threat. So mindfulness is really just paying attention in a particular way, which is paying attention to the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally. So a mindful stance sort of says, oh, what's happening right now? And can I get curious about it? Okay, now what's happening in this moment? And can I get curious about that?
No, that's not exactly what it says.
And there's a ton of research that suggests that really can help us unlock basic safety in our mind and can help us think.
Well, yes.
So mindfulness calms us down and
way
makes us less likely to take mental shortcuts. Implicit bias and stereotyping both reduced after folks have done a brief mindfulness exercise in the literature. There's also a really hopeful evidence that if you have a student do some mindfulness activities before they take on a task, the impact of stereotype threat and its drain of be reduced. So what I would like to do for us is just a very brief mindfulness exercise before we move on, if you'll indulge me. This will take us about 2 minutes. I would like you, if you feel comfortable, to find your feet flat on the floor and maybe get your back against the back of your chair.
All right, we're all doing mindfulness today.
So you're in a fairly easy
I won't steer
position.
you guys wrong. If you want to do mindfulness, we can do mindfulness.
And then I would ask you to look around the room and identify 5 things you can see with your eyes right now.
No.
And just name those to yourself.
That's, well, I suppose it could be mindfulness.
And when you feel complete with that, I would like you to bring your attention into your ears and see if you can identify 4 sounds. And if you can't, don't worry, even just the attempt helps you access mindfulness. And then I'd like you to sort of scan the outside of your body with your mind and just identify 3 things that you're touching right now. Could be the chair, could be something in your hands, could be where your feet are landing. And then bring your attention into your nose and try to locate 2 things you can smell. And then lastly, you're looking for 1 thing you can taste. And if that's not available to you, if you haven't had anything for a while,
I can taste Chinese food.
Locate where your tongue is sitting in your mouth. And as always, I appreciate large groups of people for indulging me with a mindfulness exercise.
That was not a real mindfulness
I also
exercise.
want to leave us with
The
this.
reason that was not a real mindfulness exercise is there was no deep breathing. There was no ground. Well, I guess there was a little bit of grounding. There was no centering. That was not a real mindfulness exercise. Do not take that as any version of real mindfulness. I'm sorry. That was not real mindfulness.
We all want safety, belonging, and self-respect. And we all want that for ourselves and our kids. As I was listening through to the the conversation and the questions that have led up to this meeting, that was
all right.
really what
Now we're
stood
going
out
to get
me.
into the brain
We all want
washing
safety,
section of the
belonging, and
meeting.
self-respect for ourselves and our kids. That's something we all share, and that's good news, and hopefully something that we can build on in our session today. Thanks.
Jillian, thank you so much for spending time with us, sharing some of that content and information. The next job I have is to walk you through the content of the work of EWSD related to equity. And so I'm going to do that now, and I will do that through
wait. This is even more insidious than I thought. They literally brought in a clinical psychologist to get everyone relaxed enough to be brainwashed by the director of equity in Essex School District. It's not as though the clinical psychologist is even presenting on equity. She's not. She just brought people. They brought the clinical psychologist in to get everyone comfortable with hearing this equity bullshit that we're all about to hear. So I want everyone to snap out of it. No more fucking mindfulness, okay? We need to be alert. We don't need to be calm. Our brain is not shut off. We are going to question every single thing this woman says. We're not going to be comfortable.
through a slide deck. The first piece that we're going to talk about is
brainwashing.
why equity and why now. Why is that important? I want to remind us first of the vision for EWSD, Growing Hearts and Minds for a Better Today and Tomorrow. Every day, every way, everyone.
Yeah.
And that everyone
Here's your spanking.
really matters. And it requires us to know where we are It requires us to recognize our strengths, but also to see our areas of growth
Holy
and
shit.
recognize
Hang
what
on. I just want to rest on this for a second. They literally tried to do a hypnotic induction. These people are so desperate for buy-in to this equity bullshit that they literally tried to do a hypnotic induction ceremony. That is the most amazing thing I have ever seen in my life. I did not agree to be hypnotized. Wow.
And just talked about related to the relationships and learning being very interconnected. The research is very clear about that. And so we know that the relationships between each other, how we see each other, how we engage with each other, how we think about each other matters in our work. And if we are going to get to the point of the EWSD vision being realized, then we must think about this body of work and the experiences of people who are not feeling like they are represented yet in the context of this policy. It's our obligation to do that. Our data is clear. Our early literacy data is really interesting in that it shows our white students and our Black students performing almost at parity. Very similarly, K-5 literacy data. By the time students get to high school, there's a tremendous difference in the number of Black students who are placed at the 100 level class. And so we know that's true from our data. We also know that when we disaggregate data by identity, which I just feel like it's important to note that that began to be required by law, by the No Child Left Behind law that was passed under the Bush administration. We're obligated to take a look at our data through an identity lens, and we have gaps in our outcomes. Our advanced placement class participation data helps us know and understand who does and does not have access, and that can be predicted by demographics. Our athletics access data is interesting in that you know, the students who are able to afford really high quality instruction through personal and professional training outside of public systems and private athletic space have higher levels of access over time to skills that allow them to be chosen for athletic teams. That's not always true. None of this is always true for everyone. But when we look at our larger sets of data, that shows up. We also know from our student experiences in our school district that students experience microaggressions, bias incidents, and harassment based on protected class.
There is no possible way, there is zero possible way for them to know that students experience microaggressions based on protected class. There is zero possible way for them to assess that. That is bullshit. They do not know that at all. They have made up that information. There is no possible way for them to know that with any scientific, ethical accuracy.
Happens. And so since we know it happens, we have an obligation to address
You
that.
don't know what happens.
You know, the other thing
hypnotized
that
an audience
our
and then
leadership team has
claimed
been
it
talking
did.
about is what information don't we collect? We have a pretty large data set. We've taken a look at about 385 data points through a solid equity lens as a school district leadership team to think about our own data set that we have. And inevitably, when we talk about that data, there's a question about, well, why don't we collect this data? Or why don't we collect that data? And what about the stories? What about the data that isn't in the numbers? What about that information? I also just wanted to take a moment as we think about our data to recognize the danger of the bell curve in marginalizing some. So if you think about the bell curve, basically it's sort of the rule of averages. There are people who fall on one end, people who fall on another, and the bell curve is where you have the middle, where the most people fall. It's the rule of averages. And when we think about our work in that way, there are students, faculty, staff, people, community members who fall on the ends of the bell curve. And equity work is about valuing everyone, regardless of where you fall. in those averages. And so that's why that's so important. I also wanted to note the pandemic related inequities, and Jillian talked a little bit about those. The pandemic has had inequitable effects on people based on individual circumstances, and we can see that both through identity and intersectionality of identity, through health and employment and housing and educational access. So now is the time. You know, many of you may have read articles about the intensifying view of inequities in education and in other institutions. And so it is now, and it is time. And we need to do this body of work to be better than we are. There are many great things about the Essex Westford School District. For sure. I've been here a long time. I'm grateful for all of the opportunities and all of the relationships that I have here and the amazing teachers that we have. We have some work to do to be honest with ourselves about our outcomes and what they look like if we're going to be great, if we're going to meet our vision. So those are some of the reasons why. I'd now like to move into how EWSD will address equity and share with you that one of our primary features of equity work is student leadership. Student voice is a really critical part.
Same as Burlington. Same as Burlington.
In partnerships with students is a necessary part of this entire plan.
Okay, I brought this up last time. Let me actually look at what James Lindsay said, because I actually asked James Lindsay about this when we were looking into it in Burlington, and I'm just going to look into my DMs real quick. Lindsay. There he is. All right. I asked James Lindsay, I said, what did I say? I have to scroll up a little. Where does this idea that students should be teaching adults come from? Like, in order to achieve social justice, the kids need to be the ones to guide it. And Lindsay says, this is literally Paulo Freire's theory of adult peasant education reapplied to children. And he says, culturally relevant / responsive teaching is exactly Freire's model redone with race and culture. Like exactly, but that's a separate point. Freire says you have to get away from teachers and students because that's an oppressive relationship, but it's educators and learners who learn about the world together through dialogue as equals. So this literally comes from that research, just so we're all aware. And this is exactly the same thing that they were talking about in Burlington.
As a matter of fact, the entire Essex High School student body in 2019 was invited to attend an equity summit, and about 25 students signed up to come. Everyone who signed up got to go. And they did a deep dive into what they felt
another
they
equity summit. We need to look that up. Equity summit.
And that's an example of the kind of work we need to do with students. Implementation of plans where students have been at the table include conversations about our curriculum changes, conversations about our engagement with the speaker series that are happening at Essex High School. We have a student social justice union that is taking an active role in thinking about equity from a student lens. We need to change our habits of practice related to student leadership, and we've been working on that, including students in hiring committees, students in policy development and instructional design, and thinking about our work. That's a really key feature of our equity plan.
They're literally integrating it into hiring? Are you shitting me? Wow.
And that goes across identity and involves students at every level. I also wanted to make note that one of our primary areas of focus is also hiring and human resources. We spend more on people than we do on anything else in a school district. It is our biggest investment. And so as we think about who we recruit and how we
They're mandating implicit bias training,
about advertising language and where we post our positions, thinking about the role that implicit bias plays in hiring practices. That's something that Jillian also talked about in the classroom. Thinking about what qualifications do and do not help us really think about the broad spectrum of people who we need as part of our community, in our teachers and in our support staff and in all of the important adults who make schools run. and making sure we're careful in our consideration of what we need and not just making an assumption that we always need the same sort of characteristics or skills in everyone, but that instead being diverse is a real benefit to our organization. We are thinking about how we retain and sustain people who have differences and are experiencing potential microaggressions and impact in our system, including through mentoring, making sure that affinity opportunities are available for adults.
I can't wait to
and
get
deep
to the
listening
Q&A, to be
people
honest.
and believing people's stories. So that's a really critical feature of equity work as well, is that when people come and share their stories about what they're experiencing, that we believe them. And we understand that if the system is having a negative effect, we hear that and we think about that issue. We also value our community relationships in equity work. And so thinking about how we are engaged with our municipalities of Essex Junction, Essex Town, and Westford. There's a fair amount of intersection around equity going on right now in Essex between the school district as well as our municipalities.
Really?
Our
Wait,
relationship with the Essex Police Department has been a really critical.
wait. They're practicing equity with the Essex Police Department? What does that look like?
Part of our equity work. We have been thinking together with the chief of police on a regular basis in many different forums and meetings and structures and communications to think about how we can ensure that we are safe and engaged and supported by police where it's necessary, but not overusing police, where mental health providers are a much more appropriate support to provide. So that body of work.
She
is
just
ongoing
advocated
and a
defunding
deep
the
part of
police.
our
That was deep.
partnership.
Did people catch that? She was like, we want to make sure we aren't overusing the police when mental health providers could be more appropriate. That's defunding the police. That's what she just advocated for. Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I just want us to all make sure that we understand what we're looking at.
Work. Community partnerships and programming. I think about the after school programs. I'm thinking about the EWSD Reads program that will be implemented through some of the COVID relief funds. These are all efforts toward building increased community partnership toward equity. Community and family engagement are also really important. I know that this conversation has been hard. I am so grateful for the number of people who are engaged. I think it's a real celebration. Again,
they haven't even had a hard conversation in this webinar. They spent more time. Do you guys notice so far? There are 14 minutes left of this webinar. They spent more time in this webinar talking about how hard this conversation was going to be and prepping everyone for the fact that they thought literally all white people would cry during this webinar. They spent more time prepping people for the tough conversation than actually having any conversation at all. There has been no conversation that is remotely hard for anyone so far in the course of this webinar.
And I know it hasn't been easy, but I think we need to take a moment and recognize that people are asking really good questions, and we want to be.
There have been no questions asked.
Together.
There have literally been no questions asked. That has not happened.
Curriculum. This is an important one, and there have been a lot of questions about it. I do have a frequently asked question area that I'm going to talk about in a moment. And this one is one that people are really asking a lot about. So the equity work will touch all of our teaching. It's not something that is a curriculum unto itself. We want to make sure that as we select our material.
Emphasize says, I'm exhausted. I don't like how I've been used. I kind of feel that right now. Emphasize. I do. Thank you for the super chat.
Materials, and we think about the lenses through which we teach. I'm going to quote a student from last night who was talking about her experience with her librarian, that we have mirrors through which we see ourselves, and then we have windows through which we see others, and that our material selection provides all students with mirrors to see themselves and windows to see others. And it is not monochromatic. It is rich with diverse ways of being, knowing, understanding. So that's an important part of this work. And as we think about material selection, we want to make sure that there are heroes from all races and ethnicities and cultures in our texts. We want to make sure that as we think about teaching history, that we teach it through multiple lenses. We want to make sure that we sustain people's cultures and don't expect them to try to assimilate into another culture. The value of diverse cultures and experiences, I've actually talked to many people about how they value this, no matter what seems to be sort of your perspective on critical race theory. Valuing culture is something that I've heard loud and clear from everyone. And so valuing that in classrooms and having that show up in classrooms in ways that is respected and celebrated is part of our work. There is a part of equity work that means that we will work harder to help students understand different identities, understand diversity, understand justice, and understand how to be in action based on your interpretation of what is important to you as a student. And so that is a part of this. This link here, I'm not going to move to it, but I will make this presentation available to people, is a link to the social justice standards from Learning for Justice, which is a structure of standards that we are using to think about how to teach some of these topics.
Okay, structural standards, Learning for Justice. Can someone that is not drunk in the Unwoke Army please note that in the Discord? Thank you. I appreciate you. I love you. I'm just very inebriated right now. But the learning standards for Learning for Justice, they just said that they're using those in the Essex School District. Emphasize says, I'm tired of being sadistic. I don't know that these people ever get tired of being sadistic, Emphasize.
I'll also take this moment to say we were at the beginning. We haven't decided everything.
Oh, really?
We haven't decided all the ways we're going to teach or all the materials that we're going to use. We're at the beginning of this. And so I want to make sure that people know and understand that as they see this work happening.
I'm going to remember this even if someone does not note it in the Discord, just so you guys know. I will remember this.
There's lots of there'll be lots of opportunity.
It's not noting it in the Discord right now.
We all grow in this way.
Oh, Incognito. Incognito, I need you to note that Learning for Justice thing in the Discord, please. Essex has a committee for equity for just like fucking Burlington. This is like Burlington part fucking 2. And they are literally right next to each other. So it doesn't actually surprise me. Wow. God damn it. Thank you. Thank you guys for putting that in the Discord. Thank you, Sin. I appreciate it.
We will be working with data across the equity work in the district, including the policy indicators, including building out an equity monitoring report. It's our goal to produce an annual report that does not only focus on the quantitative
They're copying
data,
Burlington.
Numbers,
they're copying Burlington.
The qualitative data. And
they're literally copying Burlington, guys. Everything that they're saying is already happening in Burlington and has been happening for a very long time. They're literally cookie cuttering Burlington.
Experiences of people. We're hoping that we'll be able to release those reports in the fall so that they can inform us.
So they should already have an equity report released.
We've had
they should already have
forums, as well as a BIPOC affinity space forum to think collectively about this body of work.
Okay, when she says BIPOC affinity space, what does she mean? Pop quiz for the chat. What does she mean when she says BIPOC affinity space? I know you guys know the answer to this. BIPOC affinity space. Segregation! Yes, emphasize in for the win. He's the first one. Segregation. Anytime you hear the term affinity space, resegregation, segregation, 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 segregation. That is what segregation, segregation, segregation. That's what they mean when they say affinity space. It's segregation. That's what it means.
We also are focused on bias incidents, both harassment, which is a legal form of bias related to protected class, as well as microaggressions, which are lesser bias incidents than harassment and often unintentional, but very impactful to people. And so we're working on thinking about that data as well. So with that, I also wanted to note that part of the plan is to pass a policy, which is what's driven so many people into a very engaged space, I think. And so this policy will be a guidepost for planning purposes. It does, in the way it's written now, require some structural changes. It certainly requires professional development, and it requires accountability. And so it's important to note that those are components of what we will be doing as well. Those links are to the policy in the glossary. I'm sure many of you have seen them, but I did put them there in case they were of interest. So that's a little bit about the work that we're planning to do. And I am going to move into some frequently asked questions that's going to drive us into some detail that people have been asking about, hopefully. So the first frequently asked question is, are you teaching critical race theory? I have been asked that a lot.
Yes, you are.
I do want to share that there was not a concerted conversation to say, should we teach about critical race theory?
You are teaching critical race theory.
The conversation was, should we teach about race and racism and our racial past?
That is critical race theory, you bitch.
The answer to that question was yes.
That's
we
the
should
beer.
teach about that. Should we teach about systemic racism? The answer was yes.
That's critical race theory. Systemic racism is critical race
theory.
theory.
In the community about whether we use the word privileged. And there is a plan as we engage in developmentally appropriate ways when it's appropriate to use the term privilege to describe a time where a person doesn't hold a particular identity. So that's something that seems to be
we always hold identity
of interest to people. So
no,
I did just want to
wrong.
share it. I also wanted to take this moment to share what seems to be also a very big conversation right now, which is focused on the student leadership component of the equity plan, where the students asked for speakers on a regular basis as part of our equity work in 2019. And there have been
you are the adults.
Rajni Edens, there's been
You're the
a
adults.
race and climate justice TED Talk and a series of talks. And then the director of racial equity, Susanna Davis, has also spoken at Essex High School. Those have been during academic support time. They have been for all students. And I just wanted to note that those took place. They seem to be being paired with critical race theory in a really strong way. And that is one part of our conversation.
She just literally admitted to teaching critical race theory. She just said these speakers are being paired with critical race theory in the Essex Westford School District in Vermont. She just fucking said it. She just said it. I'm glad you guys like loud me and drunk me because this is what makes happy hour great. She just said they're teaching critical race theory. I may be drunk, but I'm still paying attention. She just said they're teaching critical race theory. We're going to rewind.
At Essex High School. Those have been during academic support time. They have been for all students. And I just wanted to note that those took place. They seem to be being paired with critical race theory in a really strong way. And that is one part of our conversation.
But I thought critical race theory wasn't taught at the K through 12 schools.
Overtake the rest of the pieces that we've just talked about. And I also hope it stays a focus, because it is important talking about race and our racial past and how it
we're going to clip this whole
today.
fucking thing incognito. We're going to clip the whole
Is
fucking thing.
Is this policy only about race? No. The equity policy is designed to support students who are historically marginalized for many reasons.
That's about race.
If we're successful,
like
all
Popeye
students
right
will be visible, heard, and valued in our schools. That is the goal. Race is a critical first step. And I think we've pretty much proven the fact that race seems to be the most difficult one to talk about.
No.
And
No.
that's true.
How have you
It is
proven
also-
that? How have you proven that? How have you even remotely come close to proving that? You haven't talked about it this entire fucking presentation. I have had a 10% alcohol beer after a 7% alcohol beer, and I still know that you have not talked about it in this entire conversation. You have not proven that at all in any way. All you did was have a clinical psychologist come on to try to brainwash and hypnotize your fucking audience before you talked about any of this equity plan bullshit. You haven't proven a fucking thing. I had to get that out of my system. I apologize for my tone.
Also about disability. It is also about experiencing poverty. It is also about LGBTQIA plus community members. It is about experiences for students all across a range of intersectionality, ethnic, religious difference, many some of the clothing differences that happen for students based on ethnicity or religion. So all of that is part of this policy, and race is important. You've heard me say that before. Are we shaming white students? No. We are trying to understand our history, and that's necessary. We're trying to recognize the role of identity and lived experiences, and we're trying to listen to people who have had those experiences. Some people have them, some people don't. We are listening when that happens for people. Valuing the inherent worth of people without identity causing judgment is a goal. And that doesn't need to be about shame, but being uncomfortable with this seems to be a given.
How is it a given? They keep, oh my God, they keep saying that. You have not proven that at all. Literally, no one on this call has expressed any discomfort with anything. There hasn't even been any content to be uncomfortable about because you haven't defined things. Most of the people on this call don't even know what you're talking about. Wow. Emphasize says, a fight to get the BIPOC class with only 2 kids. Well, that actually happened in Burlington. In Burlington, there was actually a demand that was made by the students that if there was a BIPOC person in class, that there always be other BIPOC people in the classes so they didn't have to be alone. That was actually real. That was made by the students. 5 more minutes.
Continue to be ready as a community
5
to
more
work
minutes,
with
guys.
discomfort, because that does seem to be happening. Will you change how you teach history? Yes. Our current lens of history will not be removed. So that's another sort of, I think, misunderstanding that's present. Additional lenses on history will be added, and it is our goal to resolve the erasure of historical reality. So there has been erasure of histories, and it is our goal to resolve that. This is not an on or off.
She's giving no
yes
evidence.
Or no, it is not a binary. It is pluralistic, meaning that it comes through multiple lenses. 2 people have an experience together. Those are 2 different lenses. Being able to hold both of those truths together is what this is about. Is this about shaming Americans? Again, it's about recognizing histories and stories that have yet to be fully represented.
She has spent more time. She has spent more time in this presentation dispelling objections than she has actually talking about what they're doing. And the reason that she's doing that is because she doesn't want you to know what they're doing. She has spent a insignificant amount of time in this presentation talking about what the equity plan actually is. We don't know. We have no idea what the equity plan actually is. But guess what? I have at least 2 whistleblowers from this community who can probably tell us exactly what the equity plan is and if the equity plan actually even exists, because she hasn't talked about it at all. She went straight from, let's brainwash you into not being afraid of fear in this conversation, and let's do a mindfulness activity that is designed to hypnotize you. She went straight from that into, we're going to do this equity stuff, and isn't it really great? And then she was like, let's talk about all the objections to my plan and why I'm not really a racist white savior lady. I'm really not a white savior lady. I just want kids to know accurate history. And I'm going to talk about all the objections that the far right lunatics have to my awesome equity plan that I didn't really talk to you about. That's exactly what just happened. She hasn't talked about her plan at all. We are not letting this woman off the hook for whatever fucking plan she's implementing that she is not sharing with the community. Because I'm going to bet you that the community does not understand what she's doing because she hasn't told them what they're doing. She hasn't told them in any way. And I've had 2 fucking largely alcoholic beers, and I even know that. But I also watch this stuff a lot along with you guys. But like normal people, they don't know this because they don't live in this shit like we do, sadly.
In school, and I think we should be proud that we're doing this work. I just wanted to note a couple of
I think we should be proud that we're doing this work. Oh, really?
South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the teaching of the Holocaust in Germany are great examples to look to.
No. She literally just said that critical race theory is the same as teaching the Holocaust in Germany. No. Wrong. Denied. No. Sam says we have nothing to fear but fear itself. A lefty. Wow.
Where we're not denying a history or a lens or an experience, but holding 2 things together and recognizing them collectively. So in my opinion, this is not about shaming anyone. It's about valuing everyone, thinking together about our past and coming into our future collectively.
Collectively.
Is this
magic
a
word.
violation of civil rights law?
Collectively. Yes.
No. Affinity space is a long-standing strategy in schools for a lot of reasons. As a matter
This is like the best part of the presentation is this last part. She's literally preemptively defending segregation. No one has asked about segregation. No one has asked, isn't an affinity space where you separate people based on race? She's literally preempting the questioning by saying, no, segregation is in fact not against civil rights law, you silly, silly white people. It is not a violation of civil liberties to separate people based on their race. Ha ha ha, why would you think such a thing? She's preempting the conversation. Holy shit.
of fact, disability affinity spaces are a very strong part of our system.
Oh my God.
And are widely
Hang on.
accepted.
I have now decided in my drunken state that taking this bitch down is like now my primary mission in life. I find her exceptionally annoying. I find her exceptionally entitled. She's trying to fucking hypnotize and brainwash people. Like, this bitch is going to be a problem. What is her name? Erin McGuire? Hi, Erin. You and I are going to be spending some time together, Erin. I'm onto your fucking game, bitch. I know what's going on. Wow.
It's a strong part of our special education design that we have spaces where only students with disabilities receive instruction together. That's something that happens.
That's something that happens.
We are also
she's going to be my next
provide
Kate Slater is what she's going to be.
Their needs
next Kate
and lived
Slater
experiences as part of our work in education. Do we always do that perfectly? No. I also want to be careful about painting a perfect picture. This is not about perfection.
Listen, that middle school principal that we saw last week, I think that person was a useful idiot, and that person has now been plastered all over conservative media, so she's probably having a bad week. I want this bitch plastered everywhere because she's not a useful idiot. I think that assistant principal that we saw last week that was talking about how great it was that students were coming out in the 5th grade with the help of their guidance counselor, I think that she's a useful idiot. I really don't think that she knows what she's doing. This woman knows what she's doing, and she deserves to be exposed for what she is. She is a true believer. We are exposing this woman to the masses. I'm not fucking around about this. I'm not going to forget about this when I sober up. She is way more dangerous than anyone that we saw in Burlington last week.
This is about growth and improvement and making sure that we try the best we can to meet everybody where they are and meet their needs is part of the work. And discussing race and racial pasts and the present is not a violation of the law. So I just wanted to make sure that people heard that. Can parents opt out is another question that has been showing up a fair amount. And equity is going to touch all the curriculum and school experiences, and direct instruction in understanding harassment, including racism, is not really optional. Social studies is not optional. Optional spaces that presently exist can stay optional, and course selection will keep the level of option that currently exists.
We're going to deliver this woman a surprise. Oh, Judy got a bingo! Congratulations. Well done. Well done. We're going to deliver this woman a surprise. You think that you can integrate equity throughout all levels of curriculum and not give parents any choice and try to hypnotize and brainwash them into accepting this bullshit and no one's going to say anything? I've already got 2 whistleblowers in this school district. I have questions for those people. Maybe we'll even organize a group call. And I'm gonna put something in the Discord. You guys are going to like incognito, drunk, incognito. Incognito's got her LinkedIn in the Discord. We're going like this woman is gonna be a problem. So I'm gonna put something in the Discord right now. I'm gonna launch it while we're on this stream. You guys can see what I'm gonna say. Hang on. Minute 30 seconds left of this webinar. I don't even care. Hang on. I'm putting it in the Burlington group, the Burlington channel. There you go.
But equity as it applies to our entire school district is not an optional experience.
I'm so mad. Not as mad as last week, but kind of in that same vein. Yes.
Equity is not Democrat or Republican
Fuck
in its
you.
Ideals. It's civil rights and human rights
No.
that are not political. We teach them as part of our core education system. We teach through lenses in education that include political lenses, religious lenses, cultural lenses, identity lenses. And as we do that teaching, it is our responsibility to stay nonpartisan. That does not mean information about politics is not present in school, but it needs to be taught in a nonpartisan way. And so that is our responsibility. And we do not see teaching about this body of work and about civil rights and being in support of civil rights and human rights as a political issue.
No, wrong.
So
Everything she just said is wrong and incorrect.
District. With that, I'm going to go ahead and end and thank people for being with.
I cannot even believe this. Sam says you can never opt out of Marxism once implemented. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? That's exactly the problem. Let's finish this up.
With us. I really appreciate all of you staying with us through that talk. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So thanks again.
Is that it? Oh, that was it. Oh God, I wanted the Q&A. That bitch? I'm not even joking, guys. I am livid. I am livid. I didn't think I was going to be... No, we don't need another freaking thing. Hang on. Stop share. I am, if it is not clear, with my constant and consistent yelling at the screen for the last, like, you know, whatever, hour and a half, I want to take that woman down. And what I mean by take her down, just to be very clear, because we're live on the internet right now, I want to show the world exactly what she's doing, and I want to explain to them why pretty much everything that she just said in the last 15 minutes of that presentation is a lie. That is a lie. She just lied to the community about what they're doing. She went out of her way to hire someone to get them nice and comfortable so she could brainwash them. That is, we have not seen that. Have we seen that in any happy hour that we've looked at in the last year and a half? No. We have never seen that. We have never, ever, ever seen in a happy hour where someone has brought in someone to make the audience comfortable so that it is easier to brainwash them. And then say, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff for equity, and here are all the objections, and I'm just going to get rid of all your conservative objections right now. And she lied to them. She lied to that community. So I'm not quite as like, my livid level is not peaked, because here's the thing. We didn't see any children on that webinar. Last week with Burlington, we saw children being used on the internet, 12 years old. That was a whole next level of thing. However, this is just as bad conceptually. So, yeah, I think we need to start looking into this along with the Burlington stuff. Fuck it. Let's just do a whole curriculum about Vermont. But for right this second, I'm pretty fucking drunk. I'm sorry. It's the way it goes sometimes. That's what happy hour is. We come and we have some beers and we watch some presentation. We've been going for 3 hours. I barely eaten today. And I had a 10% beer that I drank half of my 10% beer, but I had a 7% beer before that. I'm way more drunk than I thought I would be, to be honest. But I'm still cognizant and I still know what I just saw. This is like, by the way, this is a drunken admonition that I will deny later, even though it's on video. Women always know what's going on when they're drinking. We always know. We always fucking know. And I knew what was going on in that webinar, and I outlined it, and I'm still pissed. And I'm going to be pissed tomorrow when I sober up. But right now it's 8 o'clock. I haven't really seen my husband all week. And so I am going to go get some Chinese food, and I'm going to hang out with Victor. And I will see you guys, some of you anyway, if you are members of my locals community. I will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. for Bitchcraft. I know I haven't posted an image in locals, but we do actually have Bitchcraft tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to come and bring a craft of some sort at 3 p.m., we will have an open community Zoom where we can craft, we can shoot the shit, we can talk, we can have a good time. And that will happen in my locals community tomorrow. You can get access to that by going to kb.locals.com/support. You can join for $5 a month. You can join for $50 a year. You can make a one-time gift. And guess what? When you become a member of my locals, that means you're going to get to come to our community Zooms and our Bitchcraft and our book club and all this sort of stuff. These are exclusive perks just for people supporting the channel and supporting the work I'm trying to do. And the reason that you really want to become a member of my locals and come to Community Zoom is because that is the only way to get into the Unwoke Army. The Unwoke Army, I'm already getting the Discord notifications going off right now. It's like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do, right in my head right now. Because people are posting in the Unwoke Army Discord. And that is an exclusive perk for people who I've decided are not crazy in my locals, where we actually investigate this stuff and fight back against the woke. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking about the woman we just saw in Essex. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about it this weekend. Maybe there'll be another thread by Monday that's going to get 1 million views and featured on Ben Shapiro and Laura Ingram and even PragerU, who I don't really like anymore, but they still featured my work. So we have to give them credit for that, I suppose. All right, guys, I'm going to bounce, but take care. I'm going to go get some Chinese food. Guys, enjoy the rest of your Friday night, and we'll see you soon.